But I think that we need to be equipped to the point that we are at least what Peter said. He said, be ready to give an answer. Not get ready, but be ready. All right, it is your friendly favorite neighborhood apologist, Damon Richardson, for another edition of Urban Logia Live. And of course, I will be back on tomorrow. So me and the other two amigos will be back on tomorrow. But tonight, so this is a totally impromptu episode, like completely impromptu. Literally just came up with the idea and called a good friend and brother. I am going to introduce him. Just want to make sure I'm saying it right. It's Bachota, correct? I always say Bacota. It's Bachota. Mm-hmm. And but I am going to be bringing my friend up in just a couple of minutes here. But do me a favor and let us know where you are watching from. Drop your, well, not your location, but let us know where you're watching from so we can shout you out. There we go. I see Kathy. I see you watching. LaCurtis Official. God bless you. I see you. Mark Earl Warren, my middle name. I see you watching. Shy City in the house. That's it. That's it. Fredericksburg, Virginia is watching. Keep letting us know where you are watching from, and just so good to be back. And again, somebody said I don't see the bookshelf. So I did a thing, which is why I was a couple of minutes late. Quick idea, and that was to flip the desk around and just look at the accent wall, right? So that's what I did. So this is the office, my office. And so this, if my back was against the bookshelf, this is what I would be looking at. And I said, you know what? I think it would be a nice, fresh idea to just turn things around a little bit and get away from the old drab bookshelf. So there it is. There it is. And forgive me, I didn't even have time to change that to show you how quick the idea came. I came up with the idea. But I had been wanting to do an episode with this dear brother for quite some time. Baltimore County isn't, KC is in here, Mobile, Alabama. Somebody said, I like the look. There we go. There we go. I appreciate that. Thank you. It kind of gives it a different aesthetic. And that's what we're going for. And so, listen, let me go ahead and read my brother's bio real quick. That way and this may be his first time on, but it definitely won't be his last. Joseph Bacota. And he is, let me see, he's got a bachelor's and master's degree from Wayland Baptist University, served 20 years in the Army with 4 combat tours. So this is no punk, y'all. This is definitely not a punk at all. This is a man of courage and a man of valor. And so that is awesome. 4 tours, combat tours, 3 in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. Yeah, this is a serious brother. While serving in Iraq, he says the Lord allowed him to pastor the gospel service and co-pastored many other services while deployed. He's served many other churches all over the world, including in Iraq, Afghanistan, Hawaii, Alaska, Washington State, and Virginia, just to name a few. And what else do we have? He's married. Wow, married to a beautiful Black woman. I know that's right. I know that's right. And going on 12 years in January, 4, he says, beautiful Black children. So he and his wife, Terry, moved to Wake Forest, North Carolina around 9 years ago from the Seattle, Washington area. They have 4 children, Alec, who is 32, Nia, who is 23, 2 adopted children, Jeremy and Kaylee, and a little beagle dog named Kirby. I know about the little dog, so. And but he is also a Christian content creator. I want you guys to subscribe to his channel. He'll tell you a little bit more about that. He's on YouTube. He's got about almost 8,000 subscribers, but he teaches Bible study. He's a good Christian brother, and he's really passionate about this topic. And so let us bring our dear brother on, Joseph Bacota of Rightly Divide. Let me see. I don't want to remove. Am I? No. He's already on stage. Hold on. I think you're already on.
I am.
Okay. There we go. There he is, right there.
Here
Right
I am. Here I am. Right here.
I was trying to figure out. I'm trying to click down here, and it says remove. But there you go. You are already on. Talk to us, dear brother. Greet the audience. Anything more that you might want to tell everybody about yourself? Where do you attend church now? What are you doing? What's going on in your life right now? Talk to us, bro, and then we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, Damon. And I have the military garb in the back just because I did 20 years. And I'm actually trying out this new military background. So if it doesn't work, y'all let me know, and I won't do it anymore ever. But I'm just trying it out. But yeah, I did 20 years in the Army, been saved now, going a little over 27 years. Love the Lord, and I'm a white guy who's bald, but I'm not a skinhead. And I love the Lord. And like I said, married to a beautiful black woman. So this is a topic very much near and dear to my heart. I got a little over 8,200 subscribers, so on the smaller side, but I am growing on my channel called Rightly Divided, and where we try to rightly divide the word of truth. And so therefore I come up against a lot of this stuff like we're going to talk about tonight, particularly when they try to use the Bible to actually enhance racism. So I'm totally against that, for many reasons. But the fact that I'm white, my wife is black, so I definitely, literally and figuratively have skin in the game in this one. So I really, really try to tackle this topic. But also, I came out of the prosperity gospel, word of faith, name it and claim it, blab it and grab it, and the financial fleecing of people. So my channel is really devoted to exposing that mess, why it's wrong. Hey, Sean, what's up, brother? And just talking about that, and coming up against people getting scammed, and people getting hurt, people getting victimized. My slogan on my channel is exposing spiritual control and restoring biblical truth.
Wow.
And so on my channel, man, we really try to expose spiritual control, whether it's narcissism, ego, financially fleecing, even some of the SAing, the victimization, all of that. My channel try to covers as much as that as we can to really help the victims out there. So yeah, exposing spiritual control and restoring biblical truth. And so Rightly Divided is my channel.
Nice, man. I tell you, I've been following this brother for some time. He has some incredible content, very much word centered. I'm not going to bother. I'm not even going to waste my time with somebody that's not really biblically astute, biblically sound, doctrinally sound, theologically clear, and just integral and honest in their handling of the Word of God. And I found this brother to be so. And so, as promised, I had been saying for quite some time that I'd been wanting to bring a new guest on, and I called him like at the last minute, like literally he had to make a quick pivot, but he is on tonight. And so we want to get into a conversation that I found really interesting. So he actually did this program, and that's how this topic came up. So I talk about Christian nationalism from time to time, but he did one where he was essentially engaging with another video made by an Australian theologian, Dr. Mike Bird. I think he teaches church history or something. But Dr. Mike Bird on his channel did about a 25-minute breakdown of what he called the 7 different types of Christian nationalism. And I thought that was really interesting. Not that, and I want to tell you why this is an important conversation, because one of the things that I noticed people do, because when people don't really want to deal with an argument, there's several things that they tend to do. One is the ad hominem approach, and that is to attack you. We hear that all the time. All these people, skin idolatry, ethnic Gnosticism, this, that, and the other, all trying to get away from the argument. So they turn you into the villain, right? And then there is just classic deflections. And that can look like a lot of different things. Essentially, it's just moving the focus away from what it's on to something else in order to avoid actually dealing with the issue. There's even moving the goalpost, right? You know what that looks like. It's moving the goalpost. Once you really kind of get them, cornered and nailed down, they come up with some other reason that they can't accept it, or some other explanation, some other complication, and whatever it is, right? Moving the goalpost, and so one of the more popular ways that oftentimes those who are protecting and coddling and sympathizing with white Christian nationalists, regardless of what color a person is, one of the things that you often hear from them is this whole definition game. It's undefinable. Vody Bakum used to do that a lot with things like what is it?
Critical race theory, or
critical race theory, and this, that, or the other. Oftentimes you would hear these conversations about what's not defined and what is. And so, for instance,
woke, they have different definitions of woke and how you're using it. Right.
Right. There you go. You see what I mean? And so, and that's essentially what I'm getting at, is that it's this notion that, well, Christian nationalism can't be defined, therefore there's no such thing as Christian nationalism, or right, you're really the one misunderstanding it, and all these different things. And so we want to really push back against that idea and say, it's not that it can't be defined. Right? Like if you type in leadership, right? Type in leadership, do a Google search for a definition of leadership. There are literally thousands of definitions for leadership. In fact, you can come up with a definition of leadership. That doesn't mean leadership is not definable.
Correct.
It just means that leadership is so complex that there are different ways, and everybody's really describing leadership in all of its different facets and iterations and nuances. It's not that you're not, right? And so when we're talking about Christian nationalism, typically what we are referencing is the most pernicious iteration of it, right? But make no mistake about it, it has other faces, just like pride does, right? Sometimes pride can look like kicking the can down the road, woe is me, and you say, oh, this brother's so humble, and it's really just false humility, which is pride. And then other times it can look like chest beating, right? But both of them are pride, and there are other faces, right? So what I want to do, Joe, I want to just go ahead and alley-oop over to you. Let's start talking about at least some of what Dr. Bird discussed, and then we'll make our way toward the most pernicious kind, right? White Christian nationalism. But let's play in this space here and just kind of talk about, and we don't even have to just deal with his 7. If you've got some other ones in there that you want to, or some different ways to name it or whatever, go for it, man. So I'm gonna just alley-oop over to you.
Sure. Well, the first one that I got introduced to just by watching people online trying to define this was the Christian theonomy one. And a big proponent of this is Joel Webbin. And basically what it says is we're going to be run as a Christian nation by God's law, right? So God's law is going to be the thing that governs and rules our nation.
Right.
The reason this is well, I got 2 things that I want to say. One, I'm like, okay, great. Well, when you look at the Old Testament, and by the way, a lot of this is Old Testament based. When they look at the moral law and the moral codes and all that, a lot of it's Old Testament based. But number two, it was based upon the Old Testament. Therefore, it was under a theocracy, and it
Right.
wasn't an American democracy or a republic like we have here in America.
Hmm.
So we in America under democracy, we have a right to be a Christian, but we also have a right to be other religions. We have a right to be an atheist or agnostic or any religion at all.
That's right.
So if you're going to make uh, America a Christian nation and do it under the proposed, thing of God's law, again, the Old Testament was written under a theocracy until they got, King Saul and it became a monarchy. But
Right.
before that, it was a theocracy. So number one, how are you going to go from a theocracy to a democracy and make it work under the auspices of the Bible when the auspices of the Bible weren't under democracy? Number one.
Right. Right.
But two, and remember when Joe Webbin, I don't know if you remember this, Damon, but remember Joe Webbin got interviewed by Mike Winger.
Yeah.
And Mike Winger asked a really good question about this one. He said, okay, well, basically, and he kind of cornered him. He's like, well, let's just say for the sake of argument, I'm paraphrasing, Joel, you get what you want.
Right.
He said, how are you going to make this happen?
Right.
Meaning, who or what is going to be the enforcing
Who's going to
agent?
execute it? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Who is going to execute it? Who is going to be the enforcing agency to make this happen? Now, at the time, Mike Winger said, and this is probably like 2 or 3 years ago, he said, well, the church? And then Joe Webbin thought about it, and he was like, he hemmed and hawed. He was like,
Yeah.
right? So he said, oh, the church is going to be the one that enforces it.
Yeah.
At the time, like 2 or 3 years ago. Well, my first question at the time was, okay, what church? The Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Protestant Church, and if you get the Protestant Church, which Protestant church? Are we talking prosperity gospel with Paula White, who's in the White House right now, Christianity?
Right.
Are we going to get the New Apostolic Reformation Christianity and the Seven Mountain Mandates? Or are
Yeah.
we going to get the Duggars with Christian fundamentalism and 19 kids and counting?
Right.
Like, what exactly flavor of Christianity are you going to get? Are you going to get the Catholic Church Christianity? Are you going to get the Orthodox? Is the Pope going to be involved in this? And now the Pope is going to regulate America? Like, how exactly... what flavor or branch of Christianity are you going to get? So when you say Christians are going to run this or the church is going to run this,
Right.
who's the church?
There you
Right.
go. There you
Right.
go.
So there's no defining of that. Now, fast forward now to where we are now. Joe Webbin has come off that. Now he's like, no, the enforcing agency has to be the state. Right. Where now he wants basically to be no separation of church and state, because let's be honest, the church doesn't have an enforcing power.
Right.
So consequently, then, in order for the church to make this happen, they need a brand of agency to enforce Christian nationalism on the people, even if they don't want to be Christian at all to begin
Come
with.
on, brother. Come on, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So consequently, now you have the state has to partner with the church to be the church's enforcing arm, if you will,
Yeah.
to make this thing happen. Well, guess what? Middle Ages Europe already did
Right.
this.
That's right.
Right?
We've seen
and it
this
was an
story
epic
before.
failure.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
They were literally burning innocent people at the stake and killing people because, as we know, absolute power, corrupts absolutely.
Corrupt, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you give the church absolute power to do what it wants to do, then the church is going to get corrupted. Not that the church wasn't corrupted before this, because it was,
Right.
but it really got corrupted when you gave the church power. And then lastly, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to return to the days of John Calvin and literally put people in prison if they don't go to church on Sunday?
Right. Geneva.
How far
Yeah.
are you going to go with this?
Yeah.
With your disciplinary action? People said, forget you. I don't want to be a Christian, which under democracy they're allowed to do.
Right.
But you're saying, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore under a Christian theonomy.
Right.
So what are you going to do as the enforcing imprisonment or disciplining for people who rebel against this system?
Right.
And again,
Because what
now you need the
we're
state in order
talking
to-
about,
Go ahead,
because
please.
what we're talking about essentially is an attempt to govern by using the Old Testament Mosaic covenant as the law of the land, essentially Christian Sharia, in effect.
Right,
And,
exactly.
and I think one of the issues, even with that, Joe, is that you also then have to criminalize certain aspects of immorality. right? Like we would all say, yeah, fornication and adultery and things like that, those things are wrong. They are morally wrong. We
Morally
have
wrong.
that in scripture. But do we really want to see people in jail or
Right.
killed for that?
Right.
Right? Like that's what you'd have to be doing. You would have to criminalize aspects of morality. Like, let me just help you out. Disobedient kids under Moses's law got stoned by the tribes.
Right.
They brought them bad kids out. Now, I can show it to you. They brought those bad kids out in the middle of the square, and everybody picked up rocks and stoned them. And here's why. Because under a theocracy where God is king, there needed not to be corrosive influence, right? All of that needed to be managed by God's expectation. And God knew that behavior, bad behavior particularly, was corrosive. And so there was zero tolerance under a theocracy for certain kinds of immorality, right? And so in a democratic kind of government, the reality is that more issues of morality are not all criminal.
Correct.
As bad as they may be, they're not necessarily all criminal. There are criminal aspects of immorality, right? Like stealing is immoral and it is both criminal,
Right.
but not every aspect. But under a theocracy, morality is criminal. All immorality, I should say, is criminal, right? And so that is also, and what really complicates this is then you have very immoral people criminalizing people who are no less guilty than they are
Right.
of the same things.
It
And
becomes
so
very pharisaical, doesn't it?
right.
You know, he who's without sin cast the first stone.
Come
And
on.
the problem with that is, one, then if you're gonna criminalize everything, if you will, then number one, where's the redemption or where's the redeeming aspect of it? Because you've given no place for it to be really forgiven. Or you can be forgiven, but we're going to blacklist you for the rest of your life, type of thing.
Right.
Or let's just say you can be forgiven in prison, if you will. But okay, then is this going to be like, okay, now you're like a criminal, now you're a felon, if you will, to where now it's kind of like, you know, if you will, if I use this analogy, the mark of the beast versus not of the mark of the beast.
Right.
Well, you're the person who didn't take the mark, right? Because you got this felon record. So now you can't participate in certain aspects of the government or leadership or whatever. You're like blacklisted for life.
Right.
Because you didn't take the Christian nationalist mark of the beast, because you resisted the power. Now you're going to be blacklisted for the rest of your life because you're a rebellious outsider who doesn't want to play well with others. So now we're going to look at you and blacklist you basically for the rest of your life because you have this criminal record or you're criminalized against the power system that's in play. It's so now it's like you could be a good person, but you're going to have this, you know, black cloud over you for the rest of your life because you didn't play with the powers that be.
Right.
And so, I mean, how bad are we going to do people, if you will, because they don't participate in your system?
Wow. Yeah.
It's really going to affect a lot of people in a very, very negative way.
Absolutely.
Getting jobs, getting promotions, affecting them financially, what have you, just because I don't want to be a Christian, which again, under the way it is right now, Americans have the right to do that.
Right. That's exactly right. Man, yeah, that's so good, Joe. I tell you, theonomy is, and then I think the other thing from a theological standpoint, one of the things I would say that is dangerous about theonomy is that not only does it attempt to create Christian culture out of society, but it also diminishes the role and the impact of the gospel in bringing transformation to people's lives, because that's the goal of the gospel. Not necessarily making society more culturally Christian, but actually bringing true transformation to the lives of people so that they, and obviously we want to see a just society and all that. We should advocate for those things, but the goal is not Christian society.
Yeah.
Right. And and therefore attempting to utilize government and the law in ways that are favorable to us. So I see that. So I see this kind of syncretism that diminishes the gospel. And then I think the other thing is that it also starts favoring law keeping, right? It's really hard to draw a real gospel grace dichotomy between that and law keeping. It starts encouraging law keeping.
Right.
As a
Works-based.
works-based righteousness, right?
Yep.
It's inevitable that it would do that. Any other thoughts about theonomy?
Well, yeah, even in that, if you look at the Old Testament with the Jews, even they didn't try to change the culture around them. Like, if you look at the Jews, like, they had all these other heathen nations that were around them. The law was given to the Jews and only, like, the Jews. It wasn't like, now you could be Jews if you proselytize and you converted over to Judaism.
That's right.
But guess what? The Philistines were still the Philistines. You know what I mean? The Amalekites were still the Amalekites. Now, granted, the Jews went to war with them and all that, but at the end of the day, heathen nations around them still stayed heathen nations.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? What if all of a sudden all the nations came together and we called that the United States of America?
Yeah.
Right? Well, they're all going to be part of this great big huge United States, and so unless Judaism becomes the religion of everybody else there, you're gonna have a problem. So you have to look at it in its context, right? Even Judaism didn't spread to the whole entire world, right? It was a religion for the Jewish people, and unless you converted, for the Jewish people alone, and the heathen people had their still heathen gods, and even during Jesus's time, they still had their heathen gods. Nothing changed even when Jesus came on the scene.
That's it.
So this was something that we had to look at.
There you go. That's really good. It definitely challenges the goals and the ideals of this democracy. It is built on pluralism. This notion that this is a Christian nation is historically false. It's not. I'm not saying that there are not some ideals and principles built
there
into
clearly
it
were,
that are clearly Christian, but saying it's a Christian nation is an entirely different claim that just can't be supported by the facts. We know for a fact that the founding fathers were all kinds of things, and mostly none of them Christian. Deist, atheist, humanist. The ones that were claiming Christians were, again, the secular kind that believed in owning slaves and, impregnating, enslaved women and, know what I mean? Committing all kinds of atrocities and evil. There's nothing Christian about that at all. Yet, you did have those types. But for the most part, these were not Christian founders at all, and the document that they that was produced, these founding documents, when you look at it, I always say to people is that it's not the Constitution, it's not the Declaration of Independence. Those are not our nation's earliest documents. Our nation's earliest documents are racist. Those are the slave codes. Those are the
of 1717 in Virginia.
Legal documents in what would become the United States of America. So if we really want to be accurate, we have to say that this nation is founded on white supremacy and racism, not Christianity. The earliest documents that are legal speak to that fact. And so, jump in, bro.
Oh, I just want to say, do you want to talk real quick about the Bacon's Rebellion and how it came about?
Talk. Let's do it.
Yep. Yeah, the Bacon's Rebellion is a very interesting story. Basically, make a long story short, I think it was like 1686, 1687, somewhere around there. Basically, there was a guy named Bacon, and what people got to understand is, first of all, when white people came to America, they weren't called white. The whole idea of whiteness is a whole made-up construct. They were thought of as, first of all, the white people came over here, unless you were rich, were basically indentured servants. They came over here to America to work.
Irish,
for the rich elite white people, and they were white. But they came over here, and usually if they worked for like 7 years or something like that, and then after their servitude was over, they would say, hey, we would give you a parcel of land, right? So here's the thing. First of all, when white people came over here, they were known from their nation or country of origin. So you had Irishmen or Frenchmen
Scottish.
or
That's
Italian
right.
or
Yeah.
German or
Yeah.
British. You weren't white. You were called by your nation of nationality that you came from.
Preach,
right?
man. Yeah.
So they would come over here, and then they would work also, and then they would work the fields, or whether it be tobacco, sugar cane, rice,
That's
or
right.
whatever it was. And you had slaves, but you also had poor blacks. So
Yeah.
you had basically poor white people who were the indentured servants. You had poor blacks, and you had slaves working, the fields or whatever for these white people. The problem is, after their indentured servitude was over, they said, hey, we're going to give you this land. The problem is, there was two problems with the land. Number one, the land wasn't suitable for farming. They would give it us like land in the mountains or whatever, which it may be pretty to look at, but I can't farm it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the land was owned by the Native Americans already.
That's right.
So you want to give us land that either one, we can't use, or two, we really can't have.
Right.
Right. So essentially, you guys are lying to us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what happened is this guy named Bacon, and so you have poor whites and poor blacks fighting together,
Right.
to come up against the white elite that were basically in Virginia. And to make a long story short, they petitioned the governor of England or whatever.
Right.
I forget his name. William Barclay, I think his name was. They petitioned because at this time America is still considered a British colony.
William Berkeley. That's correct.
William Berkeley's. Thank you. So they petitioned the British government, the army, whatever, to come in and help them. Make a long story short, the Bacon Rebellion fails.
Yeah.
And Bacon dies of like dysentery or something like that.
Let me just interject this real quick. I'm going to hand it right back to you, just so that everybody knows for context. This is pre-chattel slavery. What he's referring to is before chattel slavery. So at this point, black people and whites from various parts of Europe,
They work together.
are indentured servants.
Yep.
Not enslaved people. They're all indentured. So this is before chattel slavery. But I wanted to say that because the shift in the rebellion creates ultimately what becomes the system of chattel slavery. But go ahead. Finish.
Yeah. Well, so what happened was, to make a long story short, they squashed the rebellion, right? So the rebellion gets squashed, but the rich white people said, okay, hey, we got to do something about this. In order to ensure that basically poor white people and poor black people never unite and never do this again, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the whole indentured servitude system. Right. So what they did is they said, okay, poor white people, you're going to be white, and and this is where the whole idea of whiteness came about.
That's right.
Because now you're here in America, but you're not necessarily an Irishman. I mean, you still keep that, but at the end of the day, so you got rich white people and then you got poor white people, but you're still white, right? And then you have the poor blacks and then eventually the slaves, right? So that's the first thing that happened, is the whole idea of whiteness came about.
Right.
The second thing that it did is, since they got rid of the indentured servitude system, how am I going to replace that labor? Right? To your point.
That's right.
They're like, we need a whole bunch of new black people in here to replace this labor force, because we're not going to get poor white people to do it anymore. So this really amped up the slave trade, because now we got to replace that labor force. But in order to do that, in order to make sure that a rebellion like this never happens again, this is where you get, like, to your point, the Virginia slave codes of like 1717 or something like that, where they said, okay, slaves were not allowed to read. Slaves were not allowed to basically have weapons, and all this kind of stuff. So, and also the big one, here's the big one. They said not only is a slave can't be free, but if they get married and have children, those children cannot be free ever either.
Right.
So you have this slavery that's basically going on for perpetuity.
Right.
Now,
that's it.
This created this culture then of me being white has an advantage. Me being white has an advantage, because even if I'm a poor white person, right, and I don't have nothing, I don't have any land, I don't have any money, and I don't really have nothing, but at least I'm not a slave, and at least I'm still free, and therefore, since I'm free, I can at the very least have the ability to become something. Right.
That's right.
So even though I'm a poor white person, I'm still not as bad as them.
That's right. Come on.
Right. So this
That's where the racial hegemony comes in. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what you now have is, again, so one, you got rid of the whole Frenchman, Italian, German, Polish, Irish, British, white Spaniard. Now you're just
That
white,
all gets collapsed under being white. Yeah.
being white.
Yeah.
So really the only difference now you have rich white and poor white, but you're still white.
Yeah.
And then there are some still poor blacks and free blacks.
Yeah.
But then because now you have a whole bunch, like in the millions of slaves that came over here to make up that workforce.
That labor force. Yeah.
That labor force. So now you have, non-free black slaves.
That's it.
And so now you have, I'm a poor white person, but at least I'm not as bad as them.
That's exactly right.
And so, and then with the Slave Code Acts, which again is in about 50 years response after the Bacon's Rebellion, that gives birth to the Slave Code laws, which really keeps black and brown people down, and white people now have a chance to get up because I'm a poor white person, but I can get up where the black people can't.
Yeah.
And over time, this developed into white people now have more money, they can get it more established, and black people are still slaves. And there's no lot in life. So if a slave has children, those slave children can't be nothing because they're still not free and the whole on and so forth. So over time, it does bring out this hierarchy.
Exactly.
The haves and the have-nots based upon the Bacon's Rebellion.
A permanent underclass of slaves. Exactly. You can't be anything other than that. There was
real quick on that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fast forward now to the southern states, they get a hold of this because they're the ones primarily who have the slaves. And now twisted scriptures are now being used to defend this and to justify, like you said, this hierarchy of class systems.
Right.
And that's where we're going to get into maybe tonight, where they were saying, Ham was cursed, right? In Genesis chapter 9, Ham was cursed, and the black people come from Ham, and therefore black people are supposed to be enslaved because this was God's design. You have the Southern Baptist Convention who said, slavery was an institution ordained by heaven, right?
Right.
This is what they said. So now you have the churches in the American South who says, well, this is how it's supposed to be because Ham was cursed by God. So this is what God wants.
Right.
So now you have non-Christian twistings of scripture to support the institution of chattel slavery in America.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that the American church in the South was backing that up.
Come on. That's exactly right.
So I say all that to say this. So if you read Vodi Bachum's book, Fault Lines, the very first 3 points he makes is kind of like against critical race theory, but those first 3 points that he makes were actually historically accurate. Number one, and he uses it to use like the Genesis says on the first day God created. Mm-hmm. So in his book, he says on the first day, white people invented whiteness. They did.
Yeah.
That was a byproduct after the Bacon's Rebellion.
Yeah.
Right. Number two, white people invented white privilege. Mm-hmm. They did. Yeah. Now, they may have done it, by default, but basically, poor white people could make it. Black slaves can't.
That's right.
Guess what? That means if I'm a poor white person, I have an advantage over a black person that they don't have. So by default, whether they accepted it or wanted it or not, white privilege or what I call it a white advantage, advantage happened.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
let's talk about that for a second. We'll get to the third part, but I want to go back to white privilege or white advantage and explain that a little bit more. I saw a video recently where somebody was like, well, we don't do a good job. We don't do a good enough job talking about what that is. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but I don't want to leave anything on the table. So let's come back to that after you make the third point.
Right. And then when you go to the third point made with the religion aspect of it, white people invented white supremacy.
That's right.
And they did. And it was really, I don't want to say it was really based, but it was definitely backed by twisted scripture. One, again, Ham was cursed by God, which he was never cursed by God, by the way. He was actually blessed by God.
That's
and
right.
Ham was never cursed by Noah. It was actually Noah who cursed his son Canaan. And it wasn't a perpetual cursing for all of mankind or for all time. He only said, okay, your son Canaan's going to be cursed and he's going to serve Shem and Japheth. Once Shem and Japheth died, the curse was over, baby. This was not a perpetual thing for all of mankind.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you have a twisting of scripture that creates this hierarchy. Right. So now you have basically by default this white supremacy that's saying God has ordained white people to rule and reign.
Yeah.
Right. And
Hmm.
God has ordained black people to be subservient to the white man or white
That's right.
women.
Hmm.
Right. And also too, then also too, particularly after the Civil War and all that, the KKK gets started. And now you have this other branch of white people that say, no, the white people are the really chosen people of God. The
Right.
white Aryan race is really, God's people, kind of like, the opposite of Hebrew Israelitism, but it's
Yeah.
just the white people version of it. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
you have, I think they're called the British something, but I can't
British
remember.
Israelism. That's the original kind of Israelism. The
The British
Black Hebrew,
Israelism,
yeah,
right?
Black Hebrew Israelism borrowed from that, right? And I always mention that to people. So it's interesting that we we um we beat up on those guys, rightly so, because they're wrong,
Right.
and in all kinds of ways. But they're really borrowing and inverting British Israelism, which is
Yes.
built on this notion of whites that European whites are essentially the tribe of Judah that ended up migrating to the English crown,
Yes.
so that the prophecy of the prophecy of Judah constantly sitting on the throne could be fulfilled, and so they claimed that defaulted to England. Therefore, the chosen, the true Jews or the Judahites are actually British, and that's
Correct.
why they're prosperous and all of that. That's just racism on theological steroids.
It is.
Yeah,
And it's really twisted. Well, real quick, there's a
yeah,
question that says, have the Southern Baptist Convention changed their stance? They have, but they didn't officially apologize for slavery until 1995.
yeah. Come on.
95, guys, I was born in 1976.
Mm,
So when I was born, the Southern Baptist Convention still had not apologized.
right.
They did not, and I graduated high school in 94. So I graduated high school before the Southern Baptist people actually, their denomination actually apologized
Right.
for it.
Right.
We're talking 1995, guys. We're
Yeah.
talking 31 years ago. All right.
5 years before the turn of the century.
Yes.
Basically, right.
All right. But real quick, so now to get to your point about the British, Israelitism,
Yeah.
how that affected America and how that got twisted, because somehow that twisted religious non-Christian, let's call it what it is, non-Christian theology, non-Christian doctrine,
Right.
somehow got married to American patriotism.
Hmm.
And let me show you how. Now, I'm not going to blame the Puritans for this. Okay, this is maybe one slice, but they all kind of got intermingled and
I was
intermarried
going to say
together.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
When the Puritans came over here, they wanted America to basically be the new Israel,
Yeah. And
okay?
it's the land flowing with milk and honey.
The
Yeah.
land flowing with milk and honey. That's what they
Mhm.
wanted America to be. Now, they came over for religious freedom, all that. Praise God, I got that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, too, they wanted it to be the new Israel, and they wanted it to be the land flowing with milk and honey. Well, that also led to American elitism, because now you're viewing America as the new Israel, the new Zion, if
Yeah.
you will, to where America now essentially becomes a new superpower,
Yeah.
replacing Britain. You really see this once America got its, and again, I thank God we got our independence from Britain, don't get me wrong. But when we won that war, the Revolutionary War, now it really took this thing on,
Mm.
because guess what? You have white people in America. We just won our independence. Okay. We want America to be the new Israel, the new Zion, the new land of flowing milk and honey. And if you got the British Israelite people saying white people should rule and reign because we're the true Jews and we're the true people of God, this all must be God's providence, because we're now ruling and reigning and we're in charge of everything, and black
Yeah.
people are under us because they're under the curse of Ham.
How else do you explain God blessing us unless we're
Thank you.
truly chosen? Yeah. Right.
So it was literally like a powder keg of all this stuff coming together
Hmm.
to where Americanism or Christian nationalism has always, and it hasn't gone away, because hopefully we're going to eventually get to Dale Partridge and Joe Webben and all that.
Yeah.
To where there's always been a thread or a hint of white supremacy or racism that's always been attached to this. Now, granted, that does not
Yeah.
mean everybody's a racist, but there's
Right.
always been a thread of that in this movement. Christian nationalism has always had a thread of racism in it since the beginning of this country's been founded. It
Right.
has never gone away.
And to go back into the establishing of white as a social identity. Along with that, synonymous to being white was to ultimately also be Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about, so a lot of people will say, man, well, which one is it? I've had people say that. You say Christian nationalism, then you'd be like white Christian nationalism, and which one is it? I'm just using all these terms interchangeably because they are. Is that white and Christian were intentionally utilized as interchangeable and synonymous terminology.
Correct.
Therefore, to be white was to be Christian, and to be Christian was to be white, which is exactly why when a person was quote unquote baptized or Christianized, they were given quote unquote Christian names. But what names were they really given? You know, white names,
Yeah.
European names, right?
Right.
These are not Christian names necessarily, right?
Right.
But so because they were synonymous terms. And so this also explains and debunks this whole notion that, um, you know, white slaveholders were enforcing Christianity on enslaved Africans. They weren't, and in fact, they didn't want them to be. We have the
Right.
narrative, the very words of those who were enslaved. They sought Jesus independent of, most of them did, independent of the whites, especially in the earlier iteration of the what you would call the invisible institution. uh, that was outside of the gaze and the guide of whites. Those whites didn't want them to be Christians. They beat them if they became Christians. They killed them. They sold them off. They did all kinds of horrible things because to be Christian acknowledged at least four or five things. One, that they were human, in fact, that they did
Mm-hmm.
have souls and were human. And if they were human, they could be saved. Two, that if they were human, that they had equal dignity as the white.
Right. Right.
That
They're not property no more.
they were not property anymore. Three, if they became Christians and were therefore baptized, they were also now equal in Christ, therefore their brothers and sisters, and that necessitated manumission. And
Mm-hmm.
so white slaveholders saw that enslaved Africans becoming Christians was counterintuitive to the business of slavery because they think about Jesus more, they think about freedom and liberation more, they have less time to work because now they want to worship and they want to do things that's taking time and money away from the sugar plantations and cotton fields, right? So I want to say to all of the black folk out there, white folk, and whoever have believed this lie, let me tell you something. They did not force Christianity on enslaved Africans. Many enslaved Africans came over here already as Christians, and we already know that because we
Mm-hmm.
know Christianity was in West Africa. Not saying that
Already way
everybody wasn't.
before. Yeah. I mean, it was
Way
started in Africa and modern day Turkey. And like we read that in the book of Acts, like
come
from the
on,
very beginning. From the
come
very beginning.
on.
Yeah.
There you go. And the other point I wanted to make, Ali, back to you, is just to go back to this whole notion of white privilege, right? So because we may have to keep saying these things ad nauseum, and I know that facts don't convince folk who don't want to see the facts anyway, but it's still worth pointing out. White privilege does not mean that white people do not have it hard in society. It
Right.
doesn't mean
There's some
that
poor
they
white
don't
people
have.
that struggle. Absolutely.
Right. Because again, you got whites who are on various ends of the economic
Right.
strata.
There's still
Right.
classes. There's still classes.
There's
Right.
still classes, different levels of education, opportunities, so forth and so on. We get all of that. They have significant challenges. What white advantage, and I like that terminology. It just seems, it just takes us a little bit away from the privilege terminology, which almost gets worn out. Same thing though. What that means is that whites don't have the racial barriers
Correct.
in their way to prevent progress, whereas African Americans do, right? So it doesn't mean that they don't have their own challenges. One of those challenges, however, is not redlining. It is
Right.
not being discriminated on the basis of their skin color. It is not being told that they can't live in this community because they are white. It is not being told that they can't go to this school
Right.
because they are white, and all kinds of other things. It is not being stereotyped and criminalized on the basis of being white. White person gets stopped by a police officer. They don't have to worry about all of the reaching and this, that, or the other. There is a gratia that is afforded them because they are white. That means that they're less suspicious. They're less feared. Whereas
These
a
are the
black person
byproducts, right?
is dangerous and criminalized on the basis of being black. Hence, if I'm going to unbuckle my seatbelt, the officer says, "Sir, would you step out of the car?" I go to unbuckle my seatbelt. I might have a gun drawn on me, and they told me to step out of the car.
Right.
Why? Because being black makes me a threat. In fact, being black is more dangerous. Being an unarmed black person in this country is more dangerous than an armed white person. So when we say white privilege or white advantage, we're saying that race does not place in front of whites serious challenges to progress. Take this administration. This administration is full of a bunch of unqualified, bumbling idiots.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not because they're white. It's because they're idiots.
Right.
But the reason they're in the position that they're in is because they are white.
And they got lots of money.
There you go. So this administration fired hundreds of thousands of qualified black government workers and hired white idiots, all while complaining about DEI. That is what white privilege looks like, right? So it's not about whether or not whites have it challenges, and difficulties and so forth and so on. Race is just not one of those barriers that are put in front of them. That is what white privilege is all about. And that is a huge privilege, because when you start talking about wealth, one of the first markers of wealth is land. And when blacks had land, they systematically created laws to take the land from us. Hence, there's now no generational wealth. This is why, from a wealth disparity in this country, in a median combined African-American household, for every $10,000 that a black husband and wife has, as a median, whites have about $267,000. Right? And so the wealth gap was not created because some folk worked harder or were smarter, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps.
Over time.
Boom. Go ahead. Jump in, bro.
No, I was just going to say, this gap didn't happen in a vacuum. Like, this gap happened historically over time.
Right.
Because, particularly the redlining. The redlining really did totally disservice to the black community, because what it did is it basically devalued the value of your home, because you lived in the bad neighborhood or the poor neighborhood.
That's right.
So now either you couldn't sell your home because, quite frankly, nobody wanted it, or if you did have a home, it was never going to be worth as much as the white home, because that was the better neighborhood, that was the this, that, and the other thing. Which is why, by the way, and we know the racism of housing, that's why when a black family moved to the white neighborhood, the white people didn't want them there.
Right.
Because they would say, you being here is making it a black neighborhood, and therefore it's going to mess us up.
That's
right.
Right.
So we don't want to be messed up. We want to keep our home, and they realize, because they're like, my home is worth more than yours.
Yeah.
And my neighborhood is worth more than yours. Therefore, if I ever were to sell this thing, or if I want to pass it on to my kids now have generational wealth, because they know my home is more than yours. And we're not even going to talk about the ability to get a loan, because white people were able to get a loan and black people weren't able to get a loan. And then I come from a military background. Don't even talk about after World War II and the whole GI Bill, and how white people were able to go to school so they could get education, they could get a degree, so they could better themselves. A lot of black people were denied the opportunity to get the GI Bill, so therefore they couldn't, even though they just got done fighting Nazism and Hitler and all that in the war. They
Come
came
on,
back
bro.
from that and they were not allowed to get a GI Bill. This is 1940s, guys. Okay,
Yeah.
this is 1940s. So this is way after 1863 Emancipation Proclamation. So even though the slaves were free, they still had all these barriers of Jim Crow, even in our own military system. Our military wasn't desegregated until under Truman until the right before the war.
Right.
So we were still segregated and all that all the way to the 1940s, guys, even in our military.
That's
Okay.
right.
So, and then there was a reason why the segregation happened. It wasn't just on racial reasons, even though it was, but it was also, if I can keep you white and I can keep you black, then I can keep my financial equity. I can keep my advantage. My home is worth more than yours.
That's it.
My area is worth more than yours.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're the white neighborhood, you're the black neighborhood.
Yeah.
We can keep our economic power base. And I don't want to give up my wealth, my generational wealth. When I pass this on to my kids, I want my kids to get the good stuff, and so on and so forth. Now, that does not mean that the white people didn't work hard for it. Some people worked hard for those loans, and they worked hard for their money. And
That's right.
they worked in the factory for 30 some years and 40 some years. So they earned their retirement. I'm not saying white people didn't bust their butt, because they did.
Right.
But
That's
at the
exactly
same time,
right.
if you came back from the war and you got a GI Bill loan or a GI Bill and you were able to go to school and the other guy didn't just because he was black, then guess what? You had an advantage over the guy who didn't.
That's
Even though
exactly
you both
right.
fought in the same war.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about here. So
Yeah.
so you had the GI Bill that they didn't get, the redlining, the housing, which so I could not build generational wealth for my family because my home wasn't as worth more than them. My neighborhood wasn't as worth more than them. If I got a degree and this guy couldn't because he couldn't go to school, but I could.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. We saw the movie Hidden.
And here's what people need to know. It's not just prejudice that's running this system and structure. It's policy, it's legislation,
There's the
it's laws, right? And this is why when we often define racism, to give it a more exhaustive treatment is to say, well, yeah, at its base, it's prejudice, but that's not all it is, because there's a lot of things that to be classist is a type of prejudice.
It is, yes.
To be colorist is a type of prejudice, right? You know, to be sexist and misogynist is a prejudice, right? So it's not just mere prejudice; it's also power, right? And privilege.
Yes.
So when you add those elements together, structurally, it's the equivalent of taking whites and blacks and putting them in the same race, the 100 meter, and putting whites at the 70 meter line, right? And let's just say that entire distance, that 100 meter distance represents education. It represents housing. It represents land ownership. It represents jobs, loans, everything that entails progress, right? And opportunity. Everything that they were here for, right? Everything that they were here for, right? Freedom of expression and all of that. Well, all of that is that 100 meter, except the whites are given a 70-yard head start, and the blacks have to run that distance from the scratch line. And not only are they being told, well, you need to compete, you need to do better, you need to run faster, but then you've got glass on the track, you've got barriers, you've got you've got all kinds of things preventing them from even running the race, let alone that they've got to shorten the gap that's already 70 yards advantage that the whites have. That's a poor analogy, I know, but that is what we are dealing with. So you know, again, look at, for instance, Wilmington, North Carolina, one of the many case studies of exactly how that worked. There was, in many parts of this country, there was a time after Reconstruction where there was this small period, and I know you're going to go right. I know you'll be able to go right into it. This small period where slavery, I mean, the Civil War is over. Slavery has essentially ended in the southern states. The northern states, there's a lot more freedom of advantage. This produces essentially what becomes the first great migration. And so you had people, especially with the Gradualism Act in Pennsylvania, black people moving there, and in other places where they could do well. And we were establishing our own churches and denominations, our own help societies, banks, schools. Most of your, what is it, about 115 HBCUs, at least 70 or 80 of them were established in this period of Reconstruction. And so you had black home ownership and black businesses like in Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma. You had that happening all over the country. So Greenwood is just one aspect of it, but it was all over the place. So Wilmington is another. And so what ended up happening is racist whites started using propaganda in the newspaper to say, hey, look, the blacks, look at, they were in government, they were in state and city government, local government, councilmen and so forth and so on, and thriving businesses, all this good stuff. They started putting out all these ads saying, hey, blacks are going to take over. They're going to have more money than us. They're going to be wealthier than us, and essentially creating fear, the same kind of stoking of fear that we hear in this administration and MAGA, you know, the Marxists, the capitalists, the communists, and all this other kind of, the woke and all this other stuff, creating the same kind of fear, because fear drives reaction, and it always incites racist white people.
Yeah.
It always incites racist whites. So they took one night to storm the Capitol and ran, not only literally killing and looting, January 6th type stuff, ran black people out of Wilmington, North Carolina, looted their businesses, burned their homes down, took their land, and essentially ran them up out of town. Now, where does all that wealth go? Where does it go? It goes to
the ones who took it. Yeah.
They take it. They don't give it back. They don't believe in reparations, except for this country does believe in reparations.
The white
They
slave
believe
holders.
in giving the reparations to the lost wages incurred by the slaveholders after slavery was over. Right? So we're talking about a deeply ingrained system. This is why when folk deny systemic and structural racism, we're not talking about a person dealing in reality at all. We're talking about a person who is doing historical revisionism. They're delusional.
Right.
It's like looking at something that's there and saying, I don't see anything at all, right? It is that delusional. We don't need to really argue anymore that racism is real and exists, even till this day. Not just individual acts of racism. Right. Anybody can perpetuate, acts of discrimination towards somebody. But when we're talking about the more implicit, structural and systemic kind, that is the more dangerous kind, and that is the easier kind to deny, because it's easier to say, "Oh, where is it at? Is the racism in the room with us right now, Damon?" And so they think that unless you boil everything down to individualism, you can't really define it, and you really can't put your finger on it. So that just really brings us full circle back around to Christian nationalism and why it's so difficult for them to even admit that it is a thing, that it exists, and that it is the largest heretical cult in this country, that it is the most dangerous ideology today. It is the most pernicious form of Christian nationalism of any other type And let me alley oop back to you, brother.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, the reason it's so pernicious is because there's another flavor, if you will, or another type of Christian nationalism, and that is basically the kinist viewpoint.
There you go.
This is essentially, if for those of you who don't know what kinism is, it's essentially white people need to marry white people, and black people need to marry black people, and so white people stay white and black people stay black, and they never come together. Now, granted, white people are not the only kinist out there. You got black kinist and so on and so forth too. But it's essentially saying white people need to stay white and black people need to stay black. But in order to make, so first of all, they actually there's a, I don't call it Christian at all, but there's some pastors who are blatant kinist. Okay. Joel Webbin is one. He was actually interviewed by Ruslan, and he said he's against interracial marriage. So that is a kinism philosophy.
Yeah, that's it.
And Dale Partridge is another one.
Yeah.
Now, Dale Partridge is, in my opinion, a little bit, I don't want to say worse, but his theology is really bad because he just made a video, actually did a 5-part series talking about, again, once again, the curse of Ham. Now, this is rebranded, refurbished, rehashed, old slave narrative theology, guys. This is the crap that the slave masters were teaching the slaves back in the day, that white people were supposed to rule and reign over black people because that's how God wanted it. And that's how God ordained it, because this is the curse of Ham.
Right.
Here it is, 2026, guys. By the way, Dale Partridge just preached this maybe a couple months ago. Okay. In 2026, he taught essentially that Ham was cursed by God, and therefore white people need to rule and reign over black people. He said it like this: we need, in order to fix the diseases and poverty of Africa, Africa needs to be white colonized again.
That's what he said. Yeah.
That's what he said. Now,
yeah.
This also is in conjunction with Joel Webbin, who said
and ruled by whites.
Ruled by
white
whites.
Christians. White Christians. Yeah.
White Christians need to rule and reign and colonize Africa, because nothing bad ever happened with colonization, right?
Right.
White people never did anything wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
And this is also in conjunction with Joel Webbin, because about 6 months before that or so, Joel Webbin said the best thing that ever happened to Africa is when the white slave ships came to their shores.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying the same thing, that, hey, you black people need to be thankful because us white people helped you all out, because we benefited y'all, because if it wasn't for us, you'd still be living in mud huts and you'd be stupid people.
I heard Vody Barkham saying this in front of audiences of 98, 99% white men, saying, I thank God for slavery because my people were pagan this, so forth, tribalistic this, so forth and so on. And as bad as slavery was, God sovereignly used it so that my ancestors can get to know the Lord.
It's in his book, Fault Lines.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Vody, and I know he's dead and gone now, but this is one of the major problems I have with his book.
Yeah.
Why do you have to enslave people in order to get the gospel to them? Okay, that is just a stupid, dumb, hello. You don't need to enslave them to get the gospel. That is so dumb. So no, I don't thank God for slavery, because it should have never happened, number one.
Right.
Number two, that's a really stupid argument, because like you said earlier, the gospel was in Africa before the colonizers got there. The gospel was in modern-day Turkey. The gospel was in the East, guys. See, we think of Christianity as a Western religion.
Yeah.
It was in Africa. It was already there. Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt, had one of the greatest libraries in all the world before it got burnt down. Alexandria, Egypt, was one of the greatest hubs of Christianity.
Yes, sir.
Besides just Rome. As a matter of fact, the 5 major hubs, out of the 5 major hubs, only one was Rome. The other one was Alexandria, Egypt. The other one was in Antioch, was in Turkey. You had another one was in Constantinople, which was in Turkey. You had another one, I think, in Ephesus, which is also modern-day Turkey. So out of the 5 hubs, only one was in Rome. The other 4 were in Eastern countries.
That's right.
So don't tell me Christianity is a Western religion. It was not. It was very much an Eastern religion as well. Right. But we don't want to. But since we in America inherited the white European religion, we got the Christianity from the West. But the reality is, Christianity, again, the Ethiopian eunuch, when he got saved and got baptized, he took the gospel down to Ethiopia. We know this reading the book of Acts. Like this is not new. So I never bought that narrative. Thank God for slavery, so the black people could get the gospel.
Yeah.
Hello, send missionaries.
Come
Like,
on.
hello, like
Yeah.
you don't need slavery to get black people the gospel. That is just deflecting.
Well, Dale Partridge, to the point you're making, did you hear the revisionist history in Dale Partridge's uh, um, retelling of it? He was like, he described essentially Christianity as having its origins in Europe, and
That's crazy. I didn't hear that.
never
That's crazy.
mentioned the paganism of, mind you,
Of Europe.
paganism
Pagans
was
were
rampant
extremely
through
pagan.
Europe, all the way up through the reforms of Charlemagne. And then he
Yeah.
talked about how, it was just pagan in Africa, and we needed these civilized white Christians to bring Christianity to Africa.
White people were pagan for centuries.
Bro,
Have you ever heard of the Celtics?
come
You know,
on,
the,
man.
the Celtics, those white people up there in Britain and all that. Have you ever, I mean, hello?
Come on,
They were
bro.
white people.
Yeah,
You ever heard of the Vikings?
yeah.
Just from the Scandinavian countries?
Come on, bro.
Finland, Norway, Sweden. They're all white people. The Scandinavians, they're all white people.
Yeah, yeah. Early Britain was
Yeah.
pagan, right? This is
Pagan.
not, yeah. So
What do we celebrate St. Patrick's Day for? Hello? St. Patrick went up to, was it the Ireland or whatever, to what? Christianized Ireland. Because
yeah,
they weren't Christian before this, guys. Like this was, they weren't Christian. We can't automatically assume that Europe means Christian. Or another thing, you talked about culture. We can't assume American means Christian.
right.
Okay, we can't automatically assume, well, since it's American and since we believe we're founded on Christian principles, that means automatically American means Christian.
Right.
No, it doesn't. It's not necessarily the same thing. And oh, by the way, on that note, America is not Israel.
Yes.
Stop it with that comparison, okay? So you
on.
can't automatically take a promise for Israel and,
Yeah.
and apply it to America and say, well, if we do this, then God's going to do the same thing to America as if America is Israel. We are not Israel. Stop it.
Come on.
Okay, but that's what we do. But again, when you inherited that Puritan ideal of America is the new Israel, then
Right.
by default, that mindset's going to come in.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore, you're automatically going to apply all of Israel's scriptures to America and say, God is with us because why exactly? Because we think we're God's chosen people.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, really quickly on that,
Yeah.
it's really a prideful, arrogant thing. For instance, we're talking about Christian nationalism tonight. Nobody ever talks about third world country nationalism. Right? If you come from a poor country, we ain't talking about third world country nationalism.
Yeah.
This is the reason they talk about Christian nationalism in America. It's because ultimately what they want, they feel America is one of the superpowers of the world, and it is militarily and all that. But what they want is if we can get America to be a Christian nation, then God's somehow going to use America to be the influencer of the rest of the world.
That's right.
Right?
That's it.
So that is why they want America to be a Christian nation. That's why Christian nationalism is really not, it's not Christianity at all, because it's really American patriotism on steroids,
Yeah.
cloaked with a few scriptures wrapped around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like my cousin Vinny's like, I got your $200, Yankee. He's like, how do I know that's not just a bunch of ones with a 20 wrapped around it?
Right.
Well, that's what Christian nationalism is. It's a bunch of American patriotism wrapped with just some Jesus scriptures on the outside, and we're saying that's $200. It's not. It's not Christianity at all.
That's it.
It's really about, and here's the thing about Christian nationalism, ultimately to its core, and there's many different types and flavors. Christian nationalism is about power and control.
There you go.
That is what it's about.
Yeah.
Who's in control? Who can make the laws?
Yeah.
And this is tied to corruption because usually, and there was a great movie back about a year or two ago called Bad Faith. And it was talking about this guy back in the 80s who essentially wanted to make America a Christian nation. But he said straight up, he's like, guys, this is not a religious movement. This is a political movement. Because ultimately we want the Christians to be in charge. It was always about politics, and it was always about power and control, which is why, and as we know, in order to be in control, you also have to have a lot of money, which is why a lot of rich white elitists are marrying and partnering with this Christian nationalism ideal, because if the Christians can partner with the people who have money, then guess what? You can
Hmm.
come in, they can come into agreement and marry each other.
Right.
And now the Christians partner with, rich white people, and they can get what they want.
That's it.
Which by the way, is one of the reasons. But they also made another movie about this back in 2016 when Trump won the election in 2016. He was financed and backed by the president of Liberty University back then,
That's right.
Jerry Falwell Jr., and he basically used Liberty University as like his campaign headquarters, if you will, to propagate his presidency. Why? Because ever since all of 2016, they see Trump as like this Christian Messiah.
Right.
The NAR person, Lance, and I could talk, and I've made many videos about this, but Lance Wallnau, he loves him some Trump.
Yeah.
Because they see Trump as like the King Cyrus of the Bible.
Yeah.
That God is going to use this pagan heathen king to make America come into the great third awakening, right? Of this revival of the land or whatever.
That's right.
So they make excuses. Well, even though he's flawed, and even though he's got a whole bunch of, fornicating problems, and even though I don't like him morally, just like, God used a pagan heathen King Cyprus, God's going to use Trump to bring America into the third great awakening of this revival of something. I don't even know what the something is, but that's how they view and see Trump as King Cyrus.
Yeah. He's essentially the realization of what the moral majority, which co-started at Liberty University with Dad Falwell.
Which, by the way, Jerry Falwell Sr. was in favor of segregation, by the way.
That's right.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Him and what's that other school there in South Carolina? There's quite a number of them named after these segregationalists, but nonetheless, my point is that the moral majority, what they began to envision, essentially, which is this early formation of everything that we are seeing now with MAGA and all of this other stuff, is their first big win was Ronald Reagan's election, landslide election over Jimmy Carter. And that was essentially the 1.0 of the moral majority. Whereas Trump is essentially the full realization of it. Because what they've been able to do under Trump's 2 terms is to essentially integrate essentially Christian nationalist idealism into the government and utilize that to influence policy, influence global affairs, such as essentially the war with Iraq, all these different kind of things, right? And to essentially garner greater cultural control and white hegemonic influence over the country. Because the idea is, yeah, we want the country to be Christian, Americanized Christian. But what that means is white control, white dominance.
That's how it plays out for a lot of people.
That's how it ultimately plays out. And so this is why we see all of these things ultimately kind of returning back to this idealism, because that's essentially what the moral majority was envisioning. And this is why they love Trump, is that this man and his administration, his ideas, his style, his way of leading and ruling is the fulfillment of all that Falwell and them, essentially ideated in terms of what they wanted to see happen in this country. And I mean, there's not, as you rightly said, there's absolutely nothing Christian about it. I posted a video, I think it might have been either earlier this week. It may have been earlier this week, but it was a presentation that I had given at the King Summit in DC earlier this year on Christian nationalism. And one of the points that I talked about was how it attempts to use chosen language that it borrows from Israel, and then applies that primarily to white American Christians, right? And then utilize
Johnny Swigert,
that.
by the way, is one of them dudes. He believes in the Puritan ideal that America is the new
That's
Israel.
right. That's
Donnie
right.
Swaggart is one of those people. But anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
and that becomes the template
Yep.
for what they want to see. And so we can see that even when we look at, and I'm going to pass it back to you, but even when we look at essentially black Christians, essentially that oftentimes fellowship or you know, integrate and whatever in predominantly white spaces is my point. We can see how that operates. It's not that they don't mind that we're there. Is that being there, we can contribute in various ways, this, that, and the other. But being there means, just like it was for other nations coming among Israel, culturally converting. It
Yep.
means becoming like us. We saw, who was it? Joel Webbin had said in one of those interviews, like, you know, hey, when he was asked about whether or not he would allow his daughter to marry somebody black, he was like, well, if he's like Vody's son.
Vody Bachum's kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Like as long as you guys become like us.
Right.
And so this is what we mean when we say Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism frames Christianity in this white idealism, white male idealism. Is like this, you know, this is supremacy. This is dominance. This is what God has intended, and everything needs to exist and to submit up under this. And as long as it does, you won't have no problems out of us.
Right.
But you start pushing back against that.
Right.
That's where the problem is, and that is why folk, they can criticize anything black. They can find the worst aspects of black culture and criticize it, and they're not going to miss an opportunity to say black. But as soon as you throw that adjective white on there in order to criticize racism, not all white people in general, but racism, look at the racism. Look at the idolatry. They're idolizing their blackness. So notice how they're hearing it. They're hearing a critique and a condemnation of white supremacy, and then reinterpreting that as racism and black idolatry and white hatred. And what it really proves to me, brother, is that white supremacy and racism is so embedded in this nation that to rightly identify it as racist sounds un-American and non-patriotic,
Right.
to the average white person, especially the average Christian white. What they're hearing sounds like blasphemy.
Right.
And what you're really doing is just giving an honest assessment of how things have been and how things are. But because you're pushing back against this control and this dominance, the system goes into protection mode. Just like when I have my phone sitting in the car, let it be in the sun just a little bit too much. Man, this thing's going to give me a warning. Hey, remove it from the sun or we'll shut it down in order to protect the operating system from failing, right? And so this is why, and the funny thing about white Christian nationalism is that whites are not the only ones that come out to bite you. Black folk come out. When I put up a post earlier today, and the first 3 or 4 people who came out to push back against it were black, right? So so when we say white Christian nationalism or white supremacy, we're not even just talking about we're not simply talking about white people at this point. When we're referring to it from a systemic and ideological standpoint, we're talking about how it corrupts and corrodes the way people behave, the way that they think, the way that they act. And again, it's very, very clear. You operate in predominantly white Christian spaces. If you don't do that cultural conversion, if you don't conform, if you don't sound like them, preach like them, talk like them, sing the way that they sing, and they're going to see everything else that you do as cultural, and everything that they do as essentially standard, normatized. This is the rule. This is orthodoxy right here, and everything else is essentially cultural. And just the ability to see how they think, how they do things, how they practice or whatever as standard is a privilege that white supremacy and racism actually affords them. And so everybody else has to vie for inclusion and acceptance and everything because the rule is that this is a white nation, that this nation belongs. I hear white people, they say, I'm American. And what they mean is that America is white, America is me, right? And so when they say that, that's loaded. That's not just I'm a citizen of America or I was born here. It's that I am what America looks like. I am American, right? And this is why you hear all of this stuff about who doesn't belong here, who needs to go back home,
Right.
this, that, and the other. So when we're talking about, this is not American hatred. I feel like James Baldwin, right? To be patriotic, he says it is that to be patriotic and to love this country is to reserve the right to criticize it
When it's wrong, yeah.
when it is wrong, right? And so that is what we are doing here. But granted, people are going to listen to this, Joe, and they're going to be like, man, these dudes just don't get it. See, they're just idolizing blackness and this, that, and the other. This country, by default, is so used to excluding the other that to try to include the other is seen as some sort of attempt at idolizing your skin color or whatever. And it just goes to show the exclusivity of whiteness that is so normatized in this country. Let me just pass it back to you, bro. But you get my point.
Yeah, to that point, and I had a couple points I want to make. Number one, because I've been accused of being a liberal. I'm not.
Right.
I've been accused of being a Democrat. I'm not. No, just for your audience,
Right.
I'm not Republican either. I think they
Right.
both suck.
Same.
Right? I mean,
Exactly.
they both have their flaws and their sins and their issues, and I think they both suck. I don't think either one represents the kingdom of God at all.
Bingo.
They represent their own power and control and their own agendas, and it has nothing to do with Jesus at all.
That's it.
But I've been accused of a Democrat. I'm not. I've been accused of being a liberal. I'm not. I've been accused of propagating the leftist agenda. I don't. I'm like, you can tell you've been discipled by the media. It's clearly you have an agenda by the media. I've even been called gay because God forbid, if you're not a hardcore Trumper and a hardcore Republican,
you're a snowflake. You're
then
gay.
you're a snowflake because you're down with the gay agenda.
Yeah. Somebody black, one of those self-hating black content creators just said that I was a soy boy and a beta male.
I know who it is too.
Right.
And so if I come up against that, which I did,
Yeah.
then I was basically called gay.
Come on.
And it's all a lie. I mean, it's all a pernicious lie. So if you have a agree to disagree variance, then you're Democrat, you're a liberal, you're woke,
Yeah.
you're a socialist,
A Marxist.
you're a Marxist,
Yeah.
or you're in favor of abortion,
Yeah.
or you're gay.
Yeah. Social justice warrior.
Social justice warrior, all that.
Right.
So a couple points you made in there, because you were talking about, again, it's all about power and control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's just say the people who say you're race baiting, you're making it all about race, and you're worshiping your skin color and all that. Now, but there is some things of that going on.
Yeah.
I've seen Jamal Bryant get just out of control with it, and so on and so forth. So there is some people out there that really get weird with it.
Yeah.
But let's just say, for the sake of okay, all right, you're making it all about race baiting, or you're making it all about your skin color. Okay. Then my question, if you're going to make that argument to the people who say that, I would say, okay, can you at least be consistent and not be hypocritical? They'd be like, what do you mean, Joe? Okay, fine. I'll give you an example. So when Dale Partridge says white Christian colonizers, we need to reinstitute colonization and we need to colonize black people, because basically it's ordained by God that white people should rule and reign over blacks.
Yeah.
How is that not race baiting and making it about race?
Yeah.
Clearly is. Number two, how is that not making white people superior over inferior black people?
Right.
How is it not that?
Yeah.
It is.
That's it.
And worse, you're using the scriptures to do it.
Yeah.
So my point is, and this is why on my channel, I actually called for the excommunication of Dale Partridge. I actually called for the excommunication of Joe Webbin and
Yeah.
also his buddies
Doug
like
Wilson.
Brian Suve,
Yeah.
who basically says we need to reinstitute capital punishment. But apparently, the first capital punishment we're going to do is we're going to start killing some black folk because they're their black culture.
Right.
Nothing about killing white folk for them, killing people. But no, we're just going to do it to the black people. So I called for the excommunication of Brian Suve. I called for the excommunication of Joe Webbin. I called for the excommunication of Dale Partridge and people like him because clearly they have racist agenda. So my point is, if you're going to call out the race baiting, if you're going to call out your worshiping your skin color with black people, fine, great, hallelujah. But you better call it out on the white side of the ledger too, because clearly that's what they're doing.
Right.
Clearly they're race baiting. Clearly they're making it about race. And clearly they're saying white people are better than black people. When you say black people need to thank us for white slave ships coming to your shore, otherwise black people would still be living in mud huts, you're essentially saying white people are better than black people. Everybody knows that's what you're saying. Okay? So therefore, how is it not that on that side?
Yeah.
So if you're a Christian content creator, or if you're a Christian who's just talking about these issues, then you have to be fair and impartial and call it out on both sides.
Right. And even when we call it out on both sides, it's not the same thing that we're calling out. So for instance, even when you might hear things go too far from the black side, what they're not advocating for is black supremacy. What they're not advocating for is white discrimination laws. What they're not advocating for is to enslave whites, or what they're not ever advocating for the kinds of things that whites have advocated for, fought for. Imagine this: Christian ministers fighting against the abolitionist movement.
Right.
Blacks have never done those kind of things, right? And so if blacks are going too far, it's typically when they have accepted a theology out of the sheer exhaustion of watching white professing Christians act hypocritically. And so they become more vulnerable and acceptable to thinking, well, maybe Christianity is not the answer. And we know that those things go into significant theological drift. You've got things like the Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelism.
Right.
You've got perverted forms of the conscious movement and all these different kind of things. We wrote books about that. So we do more critiquing about those things than almost anybody. But we were also able to keep things into perspective, as J.K. Van Balen, the Dutch Reformed theologian, said, that the cults of the unpaid bills of the church. I find it interesting that folk will, for instance, criticize the teachings and even some of the street antics and behavior of the Black Hebrew Israelites. And even many have even said, oh man, well, they're the most dangerous group. Listen, let me just be clear, is that let's keep the criticism there, but let's also make sure that we do it in context. There's not a single Black Hebrew Israelite in government anywhere influencing policy. And they're definitely not doing it in ways that disenfranchise whites. So it can't even be in the same category of danger and again, it is dangerous for its various reasons.
Right.
But it ain't even in the same class, the same weight class. It's just like white supremacy and white Christian nationalism is in the super heavyweight division. Black Hebrew Israelism and those things and all of their iterations of black religious identity cults and all of the weird theology and some of your cultural appropriation and all that goes on, as bad as that is, that's bantamweight, because none of them are in government. Doug Wilson pastors Hexeth. He is able to do Bible study at the Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
This ideology that we're talking about is influencing people at the highest levels of government.
Right.
Let me be clear. No caption needed. The president, the sitting president of this country, is a racist. Might I even say a white Christian nationalist, because he incorporates elements of syncretized Christianity into things that he says as well. The man literally is making millions of dollars off of a Bible and
That was a hot mess. Yeah, boy,
putting
that was a hot
people
mess.
in his administration in place who subscribe to these kinds of ideologies. And so you don't have that. Ain't nobody in the Nation of Islam doing that. Nobody in Black Hebrew Israelism doing that. No Nuwapian doing that. Name the thing, name the black cult, name the black ideology that is bad, and we done already wrote books about it, and we've done 1,000 videos on it. And yet, I will still scream to the top of my lungs. They don't even pale in comparison to the threat level and the influence and the actual danger that is what people need to recognize. Because once people are able to make things equal, they're able to neutralize the other part of the argument that they really need to hear. And by people saying, oh, well, blacks are racist too, that eliminates the entire history of critique and condemnation against things like slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination laws, and all of that. Because once you can say black people are racist, you can essentially revise history to make it seem like we've been as evil to whites as they have been to us. And let me say this for the record, it ain't even close. The closest you'll find is black people who may even hate whites for things that they have done. But you don't find this whole notion of black supremacy, black desires to enslave whites, black desire. You just don't find that. For all that there is to criticize, you do not find that at all. So we don't really find things like, in reality, black idolatry. Black idolatry doesn't exist in the ways that white supremacy is white idolatry.
It is,
right?
yeah.
And what typically gets called black idolatry is black people vying and fighting for the dignity of blackness, not the supremacy of it, the mere dignity of it. Something that God afforded all humans in creation that white racist people have historically denied. So when they're vying for that, that's what they're doing. But again, because white has been so centered and this country is so racist, that to talk about anything other than white sounds racist to them. That's how sick white supremacy has made this country. So to try and so to talk about blackness in a dignified way or an honorable way sounds wrong to them because it's not centering whiteness. Mm-hmm. It's not lifting up the greatness of whiteness, right? And that is why, like, for instance, if I want my channel to blow up on YouTube, all I need to start doing is demonizing blackness. And hundreds of thousands of white and black and Asian and Hispanic folk who have eaten the rat poison of white supremacy are going to subscribe, because what sells is black demonization and black hatred. The inverse of that, though, is in doing that, what are we really doing? We're really glorifying and uplifting whiteness.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So that's really the real idolatry actually is. And again, like I'm saying, I'm sure that we know that there are those outliers out there, but they're not even equals, not even in the same category as you get my point. And I think that is something that needs to be distinguished so that you don't have this false equivalence that is really intended to kind of neutralize the sting of the argument that we're making, right? So we're not demonizing whites for being white. We're talking about,
which is where I hated where critical race theory went. I didn't like the whole white people need to repent just because they're white. Wait a minute. Now you're taking it to somewhere where now you need to repent for what you're putting on all white people. Now I got a problem.
Right.
But real quickly on that, you were talking about earlier about the culture and how basically if you want to adapt this religion or culture or politic, you have to assimilate, right? And I saw Vodi Bakum, and I did a video against this a couple of months before he died. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was in Australia, he was in Melbourne or something. I don't know, but he basically said there's no such thing as white Christian nationalism. He said, there's no such thing as white Christian nationalism. It's just like a made up term.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, I can give you Brian Savay. I can give you Joel Webbin. I can give you now Dale Partridge, right? But here's the other thing. Also, right before he died, he was doing conferences with Doug Wilson. And this is the same Doug Wilson who said slavery really wasn't that bad, right? You know, white slave masters really loved their slaves, and it was a mutual relationship. Basically, slaves loved the slave master because they took care of them. And this revisionist history of like kumbaya, right?
Right.
And I'm like, this is stupid. Like, this is really, really stupid. Like, this is this, there's not a big enough word to describe how stupid that is, right? But yet, Vodi Bakum was holding conferences with him like a couple months before he died.
That's right.
So my point is, either one, you're just blatantly ignoring history, or which is in his book Fault Lines. I didn't like it for numerous reasons, but one of the reasons I didn't like it because you're just blatantly ignoring a lot of history. Like for instance, in Vodi's book, there was no such thing as the Bacon's Rebellion. It wasn't in there.
Yeah.
Like the things that caused us to get where we are.
Yeah.
Right. Vodi didn't talk about it. Like at all. So he says there's no such thing as white Christian nationalism. Well, guess what? White people love to hear that.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they want because they're like, oh, Vodi's one of us and see we're unified and see that.
Right.
Stop. Now, I do agree with Vodi in the sense of, I didn't like where CRT went, critical race theory, because it basically made me out to be the bad guy just because I was white. And,
right. Yeah.
And now I have to repent. So that part of it, I agree.
Yeah. If you just merely put and I like what you said there, and I think that's worth kind of parking here for a minute. Is that we take frameworks and constructs all the time, whether it's educational methodologies and frameworks, even as Christians. When I study those things at the doctoral level, I looked at some of those things and I was like, I don't agree with that.
Right.
But then there were aspects of it that you're like, yeah, well, this type of pedagogy is or andragogy is helpful.
Right. There's good and bad.
Right.
Right.
My issue with the way that they were dealing with CRT is that, sure, we can acknowledge that there are aspects of it because, I mean, mind you, it's a theory essentially developed to address evil that the church wasn't addressing. So I found the irony in the church criticizing something that sinful people were more mindful to address in an unredeemed way, mind you. So it had its flaws, but they were at least more mindful to address it than the evil folk calling themselves Christians were. But I do agree with you. I don't agree with creating a mere oppressor class and oppressed class and then saying, well, the oppressor class is all white people, the oppressed class is all black people. That's too strong of a binary that ultimately collapses and ultimately leads to more of the same thing that it's attending to.
More victimization.
Right. So I never agreed with that. But like you, that didn't mean that there weren't other aspects of it that were useful. Correct. They took and said, made CRT as a whole the boogeyman. And we don't do any methodology that way. We don't do anything that we don't even do the this democratic what do they call it? A project, if you will. We don't do democracy as an idea. We don't even do. We know that it's got its problems. We know capitalism has its problems. We don't throw all of it away because of the parts that we don't like.
Right. I mean, America is a great nation, but that doesn't mean there's sucky parts too. And just because there's sucky parts doesn't make all of America suck. Like
that's it.
I tell people all the time, we can breathe and chew bubblegum at the same time.
Bingo.
Right. Both things can be true both at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And this is why I made a video. And I don't know if I remember I sent this to you, but when Vodi Bakum was still alive, I made a video and I said, Vodi, not everybody who talks about racism is woke or a social justice woke warrior.
Yeah.
Like you can talk about, nor does it mean that I'm in favor of CRT. Like you can talk about these issues and not be a socialist or a Marxist or woke You know what I mean? But the way it was presented, if you have these conversations, then you're automatically part of the left. You're automatically woke. You're because of the framing that they
Yeah,
framed it.
that's it.
And I'm like, and that's why I got labeled as gay and leftist and a
Yeah.
Democrat and propagating the leftist, left wing agenda. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why?
It's cheap, it's
It
lazy,
is. It's lazy.
it's ad hominem. It's a way to just dismiss the credibility of the argument
Right.
by creating a label, throwing you in it, and because that label is stigmatized and demonized, then that gives them the right to shut the conversation down. Because if you're a liberal, no need for me to listen to you.
Right.
If you're a Marxist, no need for me
There's
to
no
listen
conversation. Right.
to you. Right. And so that's the kind of anti-intellectualism and fundamentalism that really just undermines the kind of truth telling and truthfulness that should actually characterize Christianity. Don't you think? I mean, that kind of thing right there is just, it's so what's the word? We there's this one term we used to use all the time. It's disingenuous, right? It's just so
Yes.
dishonest. Yeah. But I wanted to say this real quick because I want you to address this. So we talked about Reformed theonomy, Christian dominionism, essentially the Apostolic Reformation. Give us a quick rundown on what that is and how that also essentially is closely aligned. It's another iteration in some sense of Christian nationalism, and I'll do maybe one or two other ones because I think we might be running a little bit out of time. But talk to us about dominionism.
Yeah, you're in my wheelhouse now because
There you
this
go.
really talks about, but this for your audience, I came out of prosperity gospel word of faith circles.
Yeah.
I was under the Kenneth Copeland Creflo Dollar umbrella, so
whole
they
Rima
were not
thing.
my pastors, but they were kind of our spiritual hierarchy.
Absolutely.
And then my stepson went to Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry for 2 years, so they're very much NAR, New Apostolic Reformation, and they're basically both two different sides of the same coin.
There you go.
Okay. It's all a theology of dominionism. Like we said, this is why it falls under the Christian nationalism camp. Because like I said, Christian nationalism is about power and control.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the prosperity gospel basically says the reason why Jesus wants us rich is because one, we're king's kids and king's kids are supposed to have the best and so on and so forth. Right. And so through that, the reason why God wants us to walk in prosperity, and let's be honest, now they softened it later on. They said it's about, having health and it's about having good relationships and good marriages and all that. But ultimately, at least in the beginning, it was about money cometh to me, right? Well, the whole reason they wanted that is if the Christians could own wealth, then ultimately we can own everything. So it was essentially prosperity gospel became dominionism through ownership.
Yeah. Wealth transfer. Yeah.
Which is why you got people like Joshua Giles still talking about wealth transfer to this day.
Yeah.
Okay. We've been waiting 30 years for it because they've been prophesying wealth transfer since the 90s.
Yeah.
Here we are in 2026 and we still haven't got no money. And we went through two crises of COVID and the housing crash in 2006 and we still ain't got no money.
That's
but,
it.
but anyway, so you still talk about wealth transfer to this day.
Yeah.
Well, the reason they talk about it is because if we can get the wealth transfer to the Christians, then ultimately the Christians can rule or reign through ownership. And basically, if I can own everything, then ultimately I can own you.
Right.
Right? It's about power and control. It's a form of dominionism. Right?
That's right.
Which, by the way, Paula White, who's now Trump's faith office spiritual advisor in charge of the faith office, she is a prosperity gospel word of faith person.
Right. That's
She's
exactly
a heretic, and she's all about this prosperity gospel, and she is a part of the ruling and reigning through ownership because she's prosperity gospel. Then you have the other side of the coin, which is called dominionism through NAR, and a big proponent of this is a guy I mentioned earlier, Lance Wallnau.
Right.
Lance Wallnau, he was under Peter Wagner and his theology and whatnot, and they believe in the Seven Mountain Mandate.
Right, the Seven Mountain Mandate.
The Seven Mountain Mandate basically says Christians are supposed to rule and reign in these 7 spheres of influence.
Right.
Politics, education, the church, religion,
family,
media,
government, media. Yeah.
finances, all that kind of stuff. Government,
That's right.
we want to rule and reign in Hollywood and all that.
Right.
There's seven spheres or seven mountains that the church is supposed to rule and reign in. Why? Because if the church rules and reigns in these seven mountains, then ultimately Christians can control those seven mountains, and by
Yeah.
default, they can control America,
That's right.
right? Which is another reason why they love Trump so much. And Lance Wallnau was a huge Trump supporter because he's part of the mountain of politics.
That's it.
And they believe Trump now is the King Cyrus that's going to rule and reign in the mountain of politics and usher in the third great awakening. So consequently, prosperity gospel and word of faith and the NAR have essentially married each other when it comes to Christian nationalism. And also, this is where it gets really weird. They've also married with the Reformed Theonomy people, and they've also married the Kinnis racist people.
Right.
Because ultimately, all four groups want the same thing.
Yeah.
So even though their theology is radically different, and for instance, like Joe Webbin doesn't even want women to have the right to vote. Okay, that's how like women need to get out of here. But yet he will partner and sing "Kumbaya" with Paula White.
Mm-hmm.
Because Paula
they're
White,
after the same ideal in the end.
they're after the same ideals.
Yeah,
which is power and control.
Oh man.
So even though their theology is completely different, Joe Webbin don't even want women to have the right to vote, but dang it, he will lock hands with Paula White and say, "Go Trump," because they want Christian nationalism. It's a form of dominionism.
That's it.
It's a form of power and control. So whether you want power control via money, prosperity gospel, that's why money cometh to me. Okay, Kenneth Copeland and Dr. Leroy Thompson, why do you want that money to come to you? So you can own everything, therefore you could be in control of everything via ownership. It's a form of dominionism.
This
now
man is cooking.
We want to rule and reign in the seven mountains, because if we have the seven mountains, we can rule and reign America via the seven mountains.
Cooking. Hold on, brother. Come on, man. Come on, bro. This man is cooking. You know, so I want to say this and jump in on this as well. I see between word faith type prosperity, reform type theonomy, and New Apostolic Reformation, I see essentially a shared eschatology in that. That also, like in a Venn diagram, intersects with things like prosperity theology as well. Case in point, most theonomists are what you would call post-millennialist.
Yes.
And post-millennialists believe that in order for Jesus to return, that what will precede that, it sounds like amillennialism, but it's not really. They believe that this golden age of prosperity, wherein the world gets culturally gets Christianized, not really converted, not really saved, not really true gospel believers, but the world gets Christianized culturally, which ushers in a golden era, which they describe as the millennial, hence post-millennial. Jesus returns once that has occurred. So they see themselves as essentially playing an integral role in ushering in Jesus's return. What they are doing in government and in these other spheres of influence to usher in this golden age of prosperity and Christianism and all this other stuff is ultimately the thing that's going to. And so notice this golden age. Well, what is it really describing? Well, not only this kind of white Americanized Christian idealism, but a type of prosperity. Yes. Right? And so that's what you find essentially with often many of your Reformed theonomist types, is that kind of eschatology. But on the other end of your charismatic dominion NAR types, they might just be full radical, premillennial dispensationalists.
Dispensational, most of them are the ones that I know. Yeah.
That eschatology has those racist undercurrents to it as well. So for instance, that's why. So it's very useful to use this kind of Israel as God's prophetic time clock as a hermeneutical lens to determine the times, right? If you want to know what God is up to, just look at Israel. But what do white Americans and those who subscribe to dispensationalism do with that type of eschatological view? It changes the way that they think about Israel politically. So they think as long as we are favorable to them, no matter how evil they are, no
Right.
matter what the hell they do
They're linked.
in the world, as
Yep.
long as we are favorable to them, here's the prosperity. God's going to be favorable to us,
There you go.
bless us, and then there's the prosperity in that kind of eschatology. And so if you are on the Reformed theonomy side with postmillennialism, or the charismatic dominion side in terms of your dispensationalism, these eschatologies are very useful ideologically in terms of helping to further the agenda and the goal of dominionism.
Yes.
Because both of them essentially are subscribing to these kinds of, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. They couldn't be any more different eschatologically set in the way that they think. Like Joel Webbon and all that, he's very much post-mill. Now, let me give you the words that he used. Let me rephrase ushering in Christ. Yeah, he does believe ushering in Christ, but he believes in Jesus is coming back for a victorious church. That's what he said. So in order to be, the way that plays out, in order to be victorious, Christians need to be ruling and reigning, okay? Christians need to have dominion over the culture, over the country, over, in this case, America. And therefore, again, America is going to be used to influence the rest of the world. So the reason we need a Christian nationalist state, so that basically America can take over the world because we're one of the superpowers. So that's what they believe. And then through that, this is how the post-mill of Christ is coming back as a post-mill victorious church that's ruling and reigning and all that. Well, the NAR people and the prosperity gospel people, they want a ruling and reigning church too. But they're completely different as far as their eschatology. But ultimately, it plays out the same. The church is ruling and reigning. And therefore, Jesus is either going to come back or he's going to come back quicker because the church is ruling and reigning. And it totally applies in Israel, like you're saying, which, by the way, Paula White, huge supporter of Israel and all that kind of stuff. Her and Joni Lamb, before she died, they went over to Israel and had a whole big event via Daystar, sponsored it and all that.
Yeah.
So they're all tied to this. Why? Because, again, the favor of Israel means the favor of America. Favor of America means a great white Christian nationalistic state.
Yeah.
And we're all married to the same ideals. So they couldn't be any different eschatology. But again, what they want is the same.
What they want is the same.
Dominionism.
Come on.
Power, again, either dominion through money, dominion through the seven mountains, or dominion through Christian theonomy. But again, the only difference between Christian theonomy is now you need the state, you need to marry with the state so the state can enforce it.
That's
but ultimately, in the day, which, by the way, we didn't talk about this too.
Go ahead.
Let's just say if they get what they want, how is that going to bring in Christ's return in dominionism? Because if the state enforces it, that's going to create a system where you have a whole bunch of false converts. You got cultural Christians, right? And this is what's so hypocritical, because in a lot of the Reformed community, they talk about, you have a lot of churches today, they got a lot of false converts. They're just cultural Christians. They're not real Christians. Well, what do you think Christian theonomy is going to do when you start deboing people and you're making the government be Christians against their will?
Right.
You're gonna have a whole bunch of churches filled with a lot of non-believing people, but they're gonna say they're Christian because that's what the state told them to say.
Right.
So you're gonna have a lot of false converts, and you're gonna have a whole lot of people that aren't Christian to begin with. They're Christian by force, but not Christian by faith.
That's it.
And that's not what Christianity is. So anyway.
Yeah.
And they even did that in Geneva. And if they didn't, if they went against it, then they would drown them in the river of the Geneva River.
Yeah.
So it was just so stupid. So my point is, it's so fascinating to me that a Joel Webbon who says women shouldn't even have the right to vote, but he will kumbaya with a Paula White. Okay. And you will have Doug Wilson who basically gave a known pedophile, told the guy or told a woman in the congregation to marry this guy, hoping it would deliver him or whatever from that. Then they had a child together, and then he essayed his own child. Okay,
Right.
Doug Wilson was the one who was in charge of all that. He administered the wedding or whatever. Well, kumbaya with Apollo White, and they will all hold hands together.
Right.
As corrupt as all of this is,
Yeah.
they will kumbaya together and say, bring all this on because it's all a form of dominionism. And then Vodi Bakum is sitting there right next to him when he was alive, God rest his soul, and he's saying there's no such thing as white Christian nationalism. When you got Paula White, who's a prosperity gospel dominionist, you got Joel Webbin, who's a Christian theonomist dominionist, you got
Yeah.
a Lance Wallnau, who's an NAR dominionist.
Come on.
All of them are white. Okay.
Oh, bro.
They all want Christian nationalism. You have a Donnie Swaggart who has the Puritan ideal of basically America is the new Israel, and therefore we want, we want America to be the great superpower. He even said America took over Great Britain over at the time to be the great superpower ordained by God and favored by God being the great new superpower. So he has the white Puritan ideal as well.
Yeah.
They're all singing Kumbaya with Vodi Bakum says, but white nationalism doesn't exist. And they're all in the same circle together.
Yeah.
That is what we have in this Christian nationalism camp.
That's it.
And then, like you said, then when you call it out, it's you don't understand, or like you said, you're just part of the left. No, this is what's in the right.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean everybody who's Republican is like this. Okay, that's not what I'm saying.
That's right.
But there is a fringe extreme that's very racist.
Yeah.
That's very dominionist. That's very much power and control. And it's very clear who they want to be in power and control.
And just think about the implications even. Remember we were talking a little earlier and we were saying how certain aspects of what could be considered immoral could become criminal, right? And so you mentioned Geneva, and I'll just say this as a plug, not to defend Calvin. Calvin actually pleaded with the council in Geneva to spare Michael Servetus's life and to just let him be in prison, but not kill him. He didn't have the power in Geneva that a lot of people thinks he had. In fact, he didn't even live in Geneva. He wasn't an actual citizen of Geneva. But they were operating essentially a type of theocracy. My point is to say heresy was a crime. It was punishable by death.
By death, yeah.
Just showing you how incompatible Christian nationalism is with American democracy.
Correct.
American democracy was founded on religious freedom.
Right.
If Christian nationalism has its way, believing in any way that doesn't align, and we're not talking about not believing as a Christian. We're saying not believing the way they believe could be punishable by imprisonment or death or whatever. This is why I also think it is just so in vogue for them to talk about the threat and the encroachment of Islam invading the U.S. Listen, I get that I would want to see more people turn to Christ than obviously turn to Islam.
Of course,
I mean, we're Christians and we know that this is the truth. But the idea of if we don't vote this way, if we don't stand together under this Christian nationalist umbrella, the threat is Sharia. That's the alternative. Listen.
Not realizing that Christian nationalism is a form of that.
It is a form of that.
Hypocrisy is just astounding. Yeah, the hypocrisy is astounding.
Man, listen, I tell you, man, I really like you, bro. Listen, you are. That's my point. It's Christian Sharia.
It is.
They're literally. That's the whole irony in it. They're criticizing something that they're really attempting to do, and the reason that, and then here's the catch. Here's the big catch. Well, why are they criticizing it if that's what they want to do? Because the biggest threat to white cultural dominance and imperialism is brown Islamic dominance and imperialism.
Right.
It's the only other thing in the world doing what they want to do.
Right.
So what they're saying is, we don't want them to do it here is because we want to do it.
Right.
We don't want these.
But they won't call it that.
There you go.
That's the dissent. They won't call it that. Right.
There you go. So that's why
that's
they
the
do
difference.
all of this. You see the Philip Anthony Mitchells swearing that if we don't do something now, we'll wake up one day and our kids will be wearing burqa and and all this other stuff. Please.
Right.
That's just dog whistling. For
Right.
Christian
If you really want to help the Christians, how about get the heretics out of the pulpit? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, clean up with the mess that we already have in our own Christianity.
Exactly.
Which, real quick, by the way, we talked about this earlier. Even if Christian nationalists get what they want, remember you talked about people being in prison and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, what form of Christianity is going to be in control? Like, because you talk about, heresy was deemed a punishable, by death back then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, who's determining what heresy is now?
Yeah.
Based upon this new Christian nationalistic law. Let's just say these people get what they want. Who's being burned at the stake now?
Yeah,
right.
Because that's what it's going to turn to. Right now, until they all get their common goal, they'll play together.
Right.
When what was the Mormon senator? What was his name? He was running against Obama back in 2013. What was his name? He
gray-haired guy. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, retired.
Yeah.
All the evangelicals were getting behind him.
Yeah.
And interestingly, one of the largest supporters of TPUSA and Charlie Kirk were white Mormons.
Yes.
He was in Utah.
Well, he loved Mormons. He even said, he's like, I love the Mormon church. I think the Mormon church should have more kids and families and more kids than they can afford. Like Charlie Kirk, he was in bed with the Mormons. He loved the Mormons. Yeah.
There you go. Mitt Romney. Yeah. So you can see, okay, we don't agree theologically and all of that, but we do have the same goals.
Right.
Now, here's what ends up happening when that goal, or if that goal is realized. Those same groups start cannibalizing each other because, like you said, somebody has got to be the orthodox.
Right.
Somebody's got to be the ruling group. Somebody's got to be the true expression of Christian nationalist idealism.
Correct.
And now that we've gotten our goal, we got to start fighting some of y'all. We got to cannibalize. We've got to destroy some of this. But they'll use it. They'll politically use it to their. All of a sudden, when Mitt Romney was, as long as he's running against Barack Obama, we need to all align behind him, right? And mind you, and I even started seeing books come out. Apologists were writing books, asking questions: Are the Mormons our brothers? And should we consider Mormonism Christianity? They wanted a convenient way to start rethinking that. Right. Because at the end of the day, here's the interesting thing. This is one of the things a Southern Baptist pastor told me this. I did not see the study, so I am quoting it, call it hearsay, but a Southern Baptist pastor was telling me about a study that SBC did, and it was talking about where many white evangelicals go when they leave evangelicalism, for whatever the reasons are that they deconstruct and they're tired of evangelicalism. In this report, it showed that a significant number of them become Mormons. And so you're like, well, how would you make this whole quantum leap from one theology to another? It ain't the theology that got them over there. It's the white nationalist undercurrent.
We're married.
And if that's married, right? And so as Bracy, Emerson and Bracy say in their book, it's really the religion of whiteness.
Yes.
With the thin veil of Christianity laid over it, right?
Again, it's that the $200, the ones with the 20 wrapped around it. That's what it is.
There you go.
It's not real. It's not real. It's fake. And the 20 is the Jesus, but inside the Jesus is the religion of whiteness. Now, granted, not everybody hears to that.
Right.
But for these kinist, for these racist Christian nationalism, don't get me wrong. They have the you know, a whole bunch of ones with a 20 wrapped around it. And
Yeah.
in the middle of that roll is kinism, is racism,
There you
is
go.
white supremacy, it's dominionism. Inside there is prosperity gospel dominionism, ownership. Inside that thing is NAR 7 Mountain mandates, dominionism, is post millennial dominionism. It's all of that.
Yeah, that's
It's
it. That's
all
it.
of that.
That is it. Man, if you have just a couple minutes more, we'll just ask a few questions from the audience.
Sure.
And I want them to engage with you.
Sure.
Now, I'll say this. Mike Bird, he talked about things like he called it Catholic integralism. Then he called it Baptican culture warriors. That was the funniest title to me. He talked about Christian Caesarism and Byzantine fortifiers. We won't be able to get into all of that, but so far, essentially what we covered and I think was sufficient. But what I usually do at the end is I entertain, 3-4 questions
Sure.
from the audience because they engage in the comment section and they're just so much a part of the conversation. We had even at certain episodes, sometimes I'll even allow them to come up on stage. We won't do that here for the sake of the time. But if anybody has a question, just put question in front of your question so that we could quickly see it, get to it, and put it up on the screen. And what we do here is we also allow for respectful, honest pushback. So if you have a pushback to something that you have heard that you may want to challenge something, well, put your pushback there and then just put pushback and then write what that is. We'll put it up on the screen and I'll have Joe answer these questions there for you. And so I don't see any questions yet loaded up in the chat, but if you have them, go ahead and put your question up or your pushback, and we'll take about 3 or 4 at the most because we're already over the 2-hour mark there. And so anybody, I know that there may be a little bit of a delay as well for people who are on ad break or what have you. So we'll give you a couple of seconds more to see if the first question pops up in the comment section in the chat here. Anybody, any questions or pushback for me or Joe Bachota? Anybody? I don't want to. I feel like if we just say, all right, that's the end of it, this, that, and the other, all of a sudden they're going to come right in. There you go. There is the first one. Go ahead, Joe. It's on you.
What era did they ever have Christianity correctly? When you say they, what do you mean by they? Are you talking about the founding fathers or who's they?
Right.
Because that will determine what era you're referring to as well, and that would also determine what time frame do you want me to talk about. But yeah, the founding fathers, I think their principles were great as far as, all men are created equal and all that. But again, at the time, black people were still enslaved. So you can have a great principle, and that principle be founded by great Christian ethics. But how are you walking
Living it out? There you go.
Right?
There you go.
There's a difference between orthodoxy and orthopraxy.
Come on.
Orthodoxy is the soundness or the rightness of what you're teaching. Orthopraxy is how you walk it out. And what I found in a lot of these, even to this day, denominations, they got great orthodoxy.
Yeah.
But their orthopraxy sucks.
Come on, man.
I like it like this. You can preach on 1 Corinthians 13 all day long, the love chapter. You can preach on love, and you can preach it very soundly. And then as soon as you get out of church, cuss your neighbor out in the parking lot.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you can have great orthodoxy, but your orthopraxy is terrible.
There you go.
And in America, historically, that's what we've had.
Excellent. Excellent. Got another question for you, Terrell Silver. There you go.
Yeah, it says questions for you mentioned the SBC earlier. What are your opinions of the SBC electing Willie Rice as the president? Is this a turnaround for SBC? Honestly, I don't know. I don't follow the SBC like that. This is just this. a little rabbit trail for me, and
Hmm.
Damon, you can disagree with this if you want.
Yeah.
For me, biblically, I have no idea why the SBC even exists, to be quite honest with you. Because ultimately the SBC is supposed to be there to help churches,
Yeah.
not tell churches what to do. And when the SBC is basically governing and policing up churches as opposed to the churches basically getting support from the SBC, I think the SBC is overstepping.
Yeah.
So for me, biblically, I don't even know why the SBC even exists. So honestly, to your question, I don't really know. I don't know anything about Willie Rice. I don't know. But yeah, just for me, I'm not a fan of the SBC from a denominational standpoint. And by the way, I'm not SBC. I'm non-denominational, just so you know.
Yeah.
But just biblically, I don't even know why the SBC even exists, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. Well, they exist because they split out from the from uh there was one convention and
Oh
the
yeah, I
second,
know.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
know that. I
Oh,
know
gotcha,
their
gotcha,
history, and
gotcha.
so
Yeah.
the reason they call them the Southern Baptists because they were
Right.
the Baptists who were in favor of slavery.
There you
So I
go.
know why they call themselves the SBC.
I got you.
But as far as in today, I mean,
I
for
got you.
today, I don't really know why.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Excellent. 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 Here's another one. But Bachota, what
Yeah.
books would you suggest to read further on Christian nationalism?
Well, I got two ways of answering this. If you really want to know what a lot of the racist white Christian nationalism want, and I'm not recommending this book in terms of I agree with it, but I'm recommending it so you can know what the ideologies are.
Mm-hmm.
How about reading The Case for Christian Nationalism by Stephen Wolfe?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's one of the guys that
A
is,
primary source, right?
yes,
Yeah.
okay. So if you want to know what white supremacy is and white Christian nationalism is and why they want it, read it directly from their mouth. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you really want to know what white Christian nationalism, and again, when Vodi Bakum was alive, he denied Christian. That's why. Oh my gosh! And Stephen Wolfe's book was out, by the way, when he said that. The Case for Christian Nationalism by Stephen Wolfe. Okay,
Right.
and these guys, Stephen Wolfe, Joel Webbin, Doug Wilson, the Brian Suveys, the Dale Partridges, they all know each other, guys.
Yeah.
They're very, very good friends. They've
They're,
been on each other's podcasts and so
right.
on and so forth.
They're all from KKK country in Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah. Right. So that would be a
Yeah.
good one. If you want to know what they believe and why they believe it, I would get my hand. But that being said, again, not that I'm saying I agree with it, but just to know what they believe, start. You can get on YouTube and start.
Jesus
YouTube
and John
yeah.
Wayne is a good one as well. Jesus and John Wayne. There's quite
Okay.
a number of them. Some of them are just not coming to mind. I've got quite a few of them in audiobooks. I was trying to get it to come up, and it's acting funky on me. But there we go. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Just a couple more questions for you. Rashida Daniels. How do you get someone to come out of this? Are they truly Christian?
If they put it this way, if they are in a church or denomination that believes that one race is above another race, like, then that's not Christian. That's not. I'm sorry, it's just not. There's
Yeah.
no place for racism and Christianity in the same sentence.
Yeah.
I love what Frederick Douglass said. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, but the Christianity of the Bible and the Christianity of the American South were not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So he's essentially saying that people who were in the American South that believed in slavery and all that they weren't Christian, or at the very least, that was not Christianity. They were sold the bill of goods. It was wrong.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So
in fact, he called it the Christianity of this land versus the Christianity of Christ. But you
right.
got,
And he distinguishes there's a difference, and he was right. He was absolutely right.
absolutely.
So I would say in that regard, they're not Christian. However, some may be Christian and they still may be members of those churches, but they just don't know any better because they're not educated in issues. And so there is a form of blindness. There is a form of deception. There is a form of ignorance. And unfortunately, when you're ignorant, you don't know what you don't know. That's the other thing too. You can be ignorant and not know you're ignorant,
Mhm.
right?
Like people in cults don't believe they're in cults. They think they
Exactly.
have the truth. Yeah.
Right. Just like
Yeah.
people who are in prosperity gospel churches don't see anything wrong with it because they think that is the truth or
Hmm.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say everybody who goes to prosperity gospel church is unsaved, because
That's
there may be some genuine brothers and sisters in there who are saved. Same thing with this.
yeah.
How do they come out of it? You have to, one, give them the truth.
Hmm.
But you got to do it in love. You can't say, "Oh, you're a stupid person" and all that. You're never going to win anybody that way. You got to give them the truth, give them the history, like we tried to do tonight in this
Hmm.
video and many of the
Yeah.
videos that me and Damon do. But also, too, you just got to pray that God opens their eyes. I
Yeah.
mean, until they can see it, they're never going to see it.
Mm.
Like, they got to be able to see it. And if they don't see it, then they're going to continue to walk down this path. So, like the Bible calls it, they got scales over their eyes.
Yeah.
So, until the scales are removed, they're never going
Hmm.
to see it.
That's it. Yeah.
So, pray that God removes the scales. I mean,
Yeah.
that's real. And then you speak the truth in love and then keep giving them information. Now, if they cut you off and they don't want to receive it, then just pray,
Yeah.
turn them over to God and say, "God, take the scales from their eyes." And that's all you can do.
Yeah. There are streams and of where you see white supremacy and racism grip people's hearts of various colors. It grips the heart of black people and turn them into essentially those who have self-hatred, express self-hatred, and all kinds of stuff. But nevertheless, I've seen it get so bad to where I just can't possibly believe that these persons are regenerated. In fact,
Yeah.
their inability to repent, their unwillingness to repent, their just the nastiness, the blindness, it it comes across to me more like it is a strong delusion of God's judgment on them.
Mhm.
Like kind of like the way that God said, or Paul said to the Thessalonian church, he says, for this reason, uh, many don't love the, will turn to error and heresy. He said, because number one, they don't love the truth. And then number two, God gives them over to a strong delusion so that they would believe the lie. So in other words,
Right.
God is like, okay, so you're rejecting me and my word over this lie. So I'm going to give you even more of that.
Mhm.
And I think one of the indications that many of these types of people are really up under God's passive judgment are the is I think is indicated by the fact that the very kind of ideologies that they follow, people are being raised up everywhere promoting these kinds of things. It's like, well, I'm going to give you teachers after your heart.
Exactly.
I'm going to give you what you are. It's the same way Yahweh gave them. They were rejecting his provision of manna, and so he gave them so much quail until it was coming up out of their noses and they were getting sick and throwing up, and it gave them so much as a judgment. And when I see this administration and I see these types of quote unquote Christian pastors brazenly teaching curse of Ham and white supremacy, this, that, and the other, I say, this is judgment. This is a judgment. And that people are growing more blind. Like for me, for them, me and you are a bigger problem than Sauve and Webben and these guys. We are the problem to them. If that is not spiritual blindness and delusion, then
Mhm.
some, if you're talking about some new believer and they're still coming up out of, they're still wrestling and dealing with the residue of their sinful past and this, that, and sanctification will catch up over time and this, that, and the other. But lifelong commitment to supremacy and all these different kind of things, kind of like the slaveholder question, Jonathan Edwards and these guys. Like, I don't believe these guys were truly Christians. They were cultural Christians in that sense, but in terms of like regeneration, I personally have a very difficult time believing that those type of people were truly One of the greatest heresies is that you may not be able to find where they contradicted the gospel, but I think to think of heresy as only there is to miss that the first heresy is in the Genesis mandate, and that is in Genesis 1:26, right? And so when you subscribe to an idea that some humans are greater than others and others are inferior on the basis of their intrinsic and existential humanity, you are accusing God of making of essentially supporting racism by making some people superior than others, as opposed to agreeing with God's word that all humans are therefore image bearers and his representatives, created in his image and likeness. And so that would mean all of us. And so to me, racism, white supremacy commits that heresy. And that heresy ultimately undermines the reconciliation that is inherent in the gospel, right? And so that's why it is heretical. And so people who are committed to heresy, to me, can't be Christian. And I know they'll throw up Peter, but Peter didn't have a commitment to heresy.
And two, he repented and changed.
And he repented.
Right. He received the rebuke from Paul, and then he moved out, and then he hung out with Gentiles, and he was good to go.
There we go. You see what I mean? Because he was a Christian. Because that is exactly what you
repented. Yeah, he took his butt whooping like a man, and he moved out. You know what I mean? He didn't justify it. He changed.
Come on.
And see maybe this is another conversation we can have for another time, but that is one of the questions I have for people who are in the. Now, granted, this is not just Reform, but I see it a lot in the Reform community, where they'll say like, well, let's just say Jonathan Edwards, right? He bought Venus, and Venus was a slave girl at 14 and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's like, okay, great as far as the narrative. But let me just say this. So either he wasn't a Christian because he did all that, then why are you revering him as a great man of God? Because ultimately, either he was never saved or he wasn't saved, he was a cultural Christian.
Yeah.
Then why are you revering this heretic?
Right.
Or he was saved, which is kind of where John Piper kind of lands on the issue, where he was saved, but he had a whole bunch of blind spots, which means, okay, fine. He was saved, but he's in dire need of rebuke because he was wrong as wrong could be.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, there's a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is, with that being said, why are we elevating these certain people to where they're untouchable? Right? To where we can't talk about Jonathan Edwards. We can't talk about, Martin Luther and his stuff he said against Jews people and all that. Like, we can't have this conversation. If he were alive today, he would either be branded as a heretic.
Yeah.
Or he's a man of God, but man, you need to sit down and repent because you got some issues.
That's it.
And again, this is what I said earlier. We can breathe and chew bubblegum at the same time.
Come on.
Right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. And it's like, I don't know why in certain denominational circles, we're not allowed to have this conversation. And this is where I also have a problem with the Reformed theology. This is my own personal beef.
Right.
Because they say if you're in continual, habitual, unrepentant sin, then that's a clear indication that you're not saved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have slaves your whole life,
and there you go. And now I subscribe to
then either you're not saved or your theology sucks.
There you go. So
right?
I'm glad you brought that up. Now listen, y'all, and Floyd, we might be able to get this last question in, but I want y'all to hear this. Now listen, Joe just said that he doesn't subscribe to Reformed theology. I subscribe to Reformed soteriology, and I have been making that same point. These Reformed culture folk will say that and then make an exemption for lifelong sin. I don't need to sing anymore. I don't need
I'm
to
with you, bro.
Anymore.
There's a hypocrisy there. There's a contradiction there.
Come on, man.
Either they were never saved and you're
come on, man.
Yeah. It's either you are revering a heretic.
Yes, sir.
Or he was never saved because he's got continual habitual sin, and by your own theology,
By your own
you need to
theology.
kick him out.
There you go. There
So
you go.
which one is it? It
Yeah.
cannot be both. It's either one or the other based upon your own theology.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, if you want to choose the Piper tentacle kind of thing, then even if you do that, and I don't like that option, but if you did that, then you've got to excommunicate them from the Faith Hall of Fame,
Right.
because they were in perpetual unrepentant sin.
Right.
Right. You can't revere them. You can't turn around and revere them. Right. So they've disqualified themselves at the very least.
Or change your theology and say,
Right.
you could be saved to have a whole bunch of issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. There you go.
Which
In
means
which
you would have to
case-
change your theology.
Yeah. Now, and glad you're saying this, because in this post that I made a little earlier today, I was talking about a couple of things I said. But one of them I said was I made a post by it's quoting Chance the Rapper, a rapper out of Chicago. And I think he's become a Christian. I'm not fully sure yet, but I think he's become a Christian back around 2020 or somewhere. But he said this. He said I'm sure I'm going to get replies from non-believers, but I'd like to ask my Christian followers out there, why don't we as a church explicitly address white supremacy and racism on Sundays? Why don't we engage the truths of America and how its values are antithetical to the gospel? And then he says, I pose a second question. Is it not directly the responsibility of the church to dismantle and defeat white supremacy? Is equality not the basis for forming the body of Christ? Like, man, he sounded like a real theologian right there. Like that is, and you want to know what some people had the audacity to jump in this comment section of mine and say, we're not supposed to be talking about racism and white supremacy on a Sunday.
Because you're woke. Right.
Now, mind you, and some people, well, we do, when we talk about pride, these people are so daggone stiff-necked, hard-hearted,
Brainwashed,
and belligerent that they'll come up with any excuse rather than to condemn racism and white supremacy for what it is. Some said it doesn't belong in the pulpit on Sunday. Now, meanwhile, you can preach against every manner of sexual sin, pride, anything that you dislike. But somehow, because people are tough on the sins that they hate, and then they're easy on the ones they love. Because racism and white supremacy is America's favorite sin, they don't even want you to call it that. One dude said, well, we preach against pride all the time. Well, while racism may be rooted in pride, you're not calling it out as sin unless you are calling it out for what it actually is. And trying to put it under the title of pride is really just you trying to avoid naming it.
Naming it, right.
And that's what we literally have, bro. There were at least 5 or 7 people that came up now they were in the minority for sure, but just the audacity of people and it just goes to show you, man, it doesn't, truth, just facts and truth just doesn't even matter to some. And here's the scary part. These people are professing to be Christian. Right. And if truth, if veritas, if aletheia, if that doesn't matter, then what is the basis upon which you're saying you're even a follower of Christ? He is the very embodiment of truth. He said, I am the way, the truth. Right. And see Christians literally being willing to follow a lie and to push back again. It was just astounding what I was reading. And I was asking questions. It was like, so it's okay to preach against any other sin and name it. Right. But to say this, it doesn't belong in church on a Sunday. Well, we can do it at any other place. And it just goes to show, like, folk are committed. this heresy. Like they are really truly
Right.
committed. It blew me away. I just had to read that. But some of the
Which is so
comments,
funny because if they want to preach a context real quick, if they want to preach a context, preach a scripture in context exegetically, then how do you even deal with we must go through Samaria? When you had Jews who hated Samaritans because they
come on,
considered them half breeds,
jeez,
right?
come
And
on,
Jesus personally went to Samaria to meet the woman at the well. Hello, that's and Jesus with the we
yeah,
always talk about the the good Samaritan. Do we even know who the Samaritans were?
yeah,
Okay. You cannot preach these texts without understanding the racial tension between Jews and Samaritans. And Jesus broke that racial tension
that's
by
it.
deliberately going to Samaria to minister at the woman at the well. So don't tell me you can't. Race was a part of that text, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
You see what I'm saying? So you can't preach that text without talking about racism or racist issues or racist agendas because that was part of the historical context of that narrative. But anyway,
Absolutely.
so
Here's what I want you to do, guys, because there were a number of other questions. We won't be able to get them in tonight. But if you'll do this, um, take these questions and then ask them in the comment section, not the live chat. Ask them in the comment section. And what I'll do is ask Joe if he'll come by over the next couple of days
yeah, I'll check
and
them
then
out.
engage personally with all of the questions because you guys are asking some really, really good questions. And unfortunately, we just run out of time. But I love the engagement. I love that you guys are really dialed in to the topic and you want to learn and see change happen. And so ask your question in the comment section on YouTube, and Joe will come through and over the next few days as he has the time, he'll answer those questions. Ask that question there, so then that way he could get a fair opportunity to be able to give you an answer and probably one that he'll probably be able to give maybe a little bit more well thought through answer since he'll have more of the time to sit with it than he does on the live. And so again, thank you so much for being on, brother. Like, man, when I
Thank you.
tell you, I gotta do this one more time, man. It's just been there it is, there it is, man. It's been an honor to have you on, and man, I hope you would come back and hang out with us again over here at Urban Logia Live. And man, I love your mind. I love the way that you think, and it's not simply because we agree on this subject. It's just the honesty and the commitment to Christ, to His Word, and when you have commitment to truth, all truth is God's truth. You can't be committed to a lie
Yeah.
as a Christian. It's just contradictory to what we're about, right? And I love your commitment to the truth above everything. It's the truth and the truth versus everything else, right?
Yeah.
And I love that because that's how you remain consistent. That's how we all function in consistency is by applying truth consistently across the board, regardless of where previous commitments were, friendships, family, and sentimentalities, and all these other things. When we surrender these things to God's word, we're going to be agreeing more than we would be disagreeing, right? And it's just clear in this issue, people want to make it seem like we're just disagreeing over this. No. We're not disagreeing with them. They are disagreeing with what is true. And that is because many of them have just not been willing to submit how they feel, what they think, what their cultural commitments, their echo chambers, their silos, their theological spaces. Those are tribes for them, and those tribes form identities. And people are often not willing to surrender those things because those things also mean loss of identity, loss of all kinds of things, fellowship, and all kinds of stuff. And so a lot of people will talk about truth, but when the rubber meets the road, they're not willing to go there because they've counted the cost and they're not willing to pay it.
Yeah.
right? And so I always appreciate.
It's going to cost them things. They're going to lose fellowships. They're going to lose maybe sponsors. They're going to lose money. They're going to lose friends. They're going to lose connections. They're going to lose networks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really are, and but that is the cost of what it means to follow Jesus and therefore stand for the truth, and so, man, I thank you so much for being on, and I know you thank God you were able to put the kids down a little earlier, so that freed you up, and man, I'm gonna have you back on, but listen, give them just before you go. Where can they find you on YouTube? I'll put it in the chat so that they can go ahead
Yeah.
and subscribe.
Yeah, if you just type in Rightly Divided, my name and my channel is called Rightly Divided with Joe Bachota. So if you just type in Rightly Divided with Joe Bachota under the search, I'll pop right up. And in there, you have my two books. I got one book on holiness because I saw a lot of hot mess living by so-called a lot of preachers. So I actually have a book on holiness. And
Yeah.
then I actually have another book that's on Amazon. Both are on Amazon. Word of Faith Preachers, How Misinterpretation of Scripture Might Lead You Astray. Like I said, I came out of the Kenneth
Yeah.
Copeland Creflo Dollar
Mhm.
umbrella. So I really expose what they teach, why it's false, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so you can get my links to my two books, but also to just go to Rightly Divided with Joe Bachota, and just like it says right there on the screen, if you typed it in the search engine, you'll come right to my channel.
Absolutely, man. That's so good. In the second volume of Urban Apologetics, Cults and Cultural Ideologies, I believe it is chapter 12 or 13. I did one on word faith theology in that. Dr. Eric Mason is the general editor, but I wrote two chapters, one on the Jehovah's Witnesses and one on word faith theology. Also, I'll just say this lastly, I forgot again to put the how to support me for Zambia. I am at 70% to goal. So here's what I will do. Here's what I will do. This email address right here that I just put up does connect you to my Zelle. So I hold on one second. I can put the Spot Fund link up as well. Give me 1 second. I do want to do that because this is really important, y'all. So let me hold on 1 second. Put the Spot Fund. Let me see. Give me 1 second to get that link up. I do such a poor job at supporting myself, and I got to get better. I literally do, because I mean, the gospel literally, runs on, financial support. I mean, we've got to do it. And hold on just a second. Can I copy? It won't allow me to. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to type it in. And here we go. I'm going to go old school, y'all.
Well, while you're doing that, I just want to say thank you for all the people who are subscribing to me and who are going to follow me. I see you all in the chat. I appreciate you all subscribing and following me now. So thank you, Damon, for having me here, and thank you all for your
Oh,
support.
man.
For
Absolutely,
supporting
man.
me as well. So
I can't keep good resources to myself, man. I just can't. And you are a good resource, brother. I really appreciate you. Hold on. RSC. You see how I'm struggling, y'all. Here it is. That is the Spot Fund link. And I do believe 7FSKR. Hold on just a second. Let me just make sure that's right. Spot.fund / 7FSKRLRSC. Yeah. So screenshot this link, put it in your browser. It'll take you to Spot Fund, and you can donate there. Or again, if you want to donate directly via Zelle, just put my email address in, and you'll see my name pop up, and you'll know it's me. The Zelle goes through extra channels to make sure you can't accidentally send it to the wrong person. So either one of these, by Zelle, you can use my email address, or this is the main crowdfunding. This is where most of the money is. There's some people who use Zelle. The majority of the people used Spot Fund. This is where most of the money is already sitting. But I will be leaving the first week in September, and I am at about 70% to go, which means, y'all, I need about $3,000 more. So if anybody has $3,000 and you are listening,
sow your seed now.
There you go. Sow your seed now. Now, we're not going to promise you houses and lands and all a 100-fold blessing and supernatural debt cancellation and all this other kind of stuff. But I tell you what, if you have $3,000 to give, that is the blessing, according to Scripture. For it is more blessed to give than to receive. But just know, you already know the work that we're doing over there. It's a labor of love. I'll be over there for 3 whole weeks, teaching most of the time, preaching. We're going to be digging out wells for clean drinking water, and building homes for orphans and widows. There's another team that does that. But listen, y'all, as soon as I get done teaching, spend an entire day, like 6-7 hours of doing intensive, and I leave and go to these sites, and I'm part of the other aspect of that mission as well. All of that is the result of people just like you who are generously giving. And so we're going over there to support our brothers and sisters in Christ. In this way, I am not getting paid. And people go into these crazy conferences and walk out with $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 checks, preaching foolishness, false doctrine, and heresy. And I've just been trying to raise $10,000 for the last 4 months, and I'm at 70%. That is not an indictment against you, because the reason I'm at 70% is because of you guys who have been generously giving. I'm just showing you that that's the disparity in the world, is that people support foolishness more than they support God's work. So if you got the $3,000, there you go. Spot fund me or Zelle it. And if you can't do 3,000, then do 1,000. But if I can get that 3,000, we can go ahead and purchase all of the equipment that we need that we'll be bringing over there. And I thank you very much. Floyd White, thank you so much for that super chat. All of you guys, all of your questions. People are like, we're going to follow Joe. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Follow this brother. He's an incredible resource, gift to the body of Christ. Thank you so much, y'all. And with that, we will bid you a good night. Stay on just for a second.
But I think that we need to be equipped to the point that we are at least what Peter said. He said, be ready to give an answer, not get ready.